Good evening. We'll start this May 23rd, 2023 meeting of the Town Plan and Zoning Commission. We'll start with our bills and minutes from our last meeting on May 9th. May I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Motion to approve from Commissioner Francis,
Second.
second from Commissioner Braman. I don't think I understand Commissioner Ford's joining remotely. We haven't seen him yet, though? No. It's just meeting minutes. Who's standing in, Mr. Wendt or?
It would be Mr. Crisillo. Can you hear me on this at all? They're not lighting up. It's not, usually this, I'm sorry, these.
No, yeah, I know you're testing it, but go right ahead.
Not working. They must have been on.
All right, well, let's, Commissioner Francis, any comments with the meeting minutes?
No, just needs the word inner edge before, Jim knows I sent him.
Okay, yeah, I thought I heard you say you sent a minor correction to Mr. Wendt, adding just a word. Mr. Wendt, that's, you understand, you have Commissioner Francis's edit? Or, you mean?
I think you said it's the word inner.
I do.
Okay.
She was suggesting, she asked a question on the regulation amendment in the case where you've got a setback, rather than measuring from the property line, if there's an easement there, it would be measured from the edge of the easement. When it was voted on, she inquired as to whether or not that would be the outer edge or the inner edge. And I said it would be the inner edge, like it would be for any, like a street line.
Okay.
For clarity, and her question, she emailed me, do we need to insert a word into that section to say inner edge, or whether it's okay? I think it's okay as is, but if you think we need to insert that word in there, I don't think that's problematic, and it's de minimis to what we've already published. So if you want to insert the word, inward edge, or edge, I think it's applied, but if you think it's important to clarify that by adding that word, I don't think it's a problem.
Commissioner Braman?
I think if it's implicit in the language of the text, rather leave the text as it is, because that's how we're gonna interpret it anyway.
Is that, I assume it's in conformity with similar language throughout our
Yeah,
regulations?
it would be like a street line. I mean, it's, it's the street line that's closest to the property. So I think it's clear, but if you want clarity, I don't think there's a problem in inserting, the word.
Okay. Any other, Commissioner Corsilio is sitting in for Commissioner Ford, in case we didn't put that on the record. Comments from the commission, thoughts? I mean, my thought is to keep it as conform as we normally do, but, yeah. I don't know, I don't have a major inkling one way or the other. Commissioner?
If you want me to read the whole, I'll read the whole section just so you have it in its context.
Sure.
It's 13.14.10 setback, no building or structure shall be closer than 10 feet or farther than 18 feet from any public street line or private right-of-way which abuts it, except, and this is the new language that was adopted, if the front setback area is occupied by public open space or existing easement, the setback requirement shall commence from the edge of said public open space or existing easement. And the suggestion was, instead of the edge, we had the word interior, that you commence from the interior edge of said public open space or existing easement.
It would have to be the interior edge when you're calculating that, I would think.
I think it's implied, but if you want to clarify that, and that was, I understood,
No, yeah, that's fair. Commissioner
this question to ask clarity,
Yeah.
and I agreed that it's an excellent question to get clarity on. So the question is whether or not they could need it.
Commissioner Levy?
Yeah, I agree. I think from implies from the closest area, which would be the inward edge, so I think it's implicit.
You can't have it any other way, then it's,
Yeah.
I mean, if it's the outer edge, then it's like 10 feet from the outer edge is, gonna be less than 10, potentially away, it could be in the easement for all we know. Commissioner Francis?
Very good.
Okay.
I appreciate the question.
No, that's fine, I mean,
Good question.
and just to say, it's always nice to stay uniform with our language throughout, too. Any other comments, questions from the commission? Okay, put this to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye or raise your hand. See 7 hands, so it passes unanimously. Next item is 2500 Black Rock Turnpike, special permit application of Phil Cerrone, architect, on behalf of Lennox Properties LLC for a 65-foot by 23-foot addition to an existing retail building in the Design Commercial District. Mr. Wine.
This property is the site of Lennox Jewelers. It's a standalone retail space on Upper Black Rock Turnpike. They're looking to do a one-story addition, and since it is an addition, it requires a special permit, which requires the public hearing.
May I have a motion?
Move the item?
Motion to move to a public, hearing, excuse me. Second, Commissioner Harrison, sorry, seconds. Any discussion? Public hearing is required. I'm gonna blame the switch for now.
Just throwing off your equilibrium.
Yeah. I'll have to use that as the excuse if that's okay. Put to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye or raise your hand. See 7 hands, so it passes unanimously. Zoning compliances, 2600 Post Road, zoning compliance application of Phil Cerrone, architect, on behalf of Blackstone's Grill for expanded outdoor dining in the Design Commercial District. Mr. Wendt.
Okay, Mr. Chair, Blackstone's Grill is seeking expansion of their, existing outdoor dining patio. Their current patio was established back in 1998, when this space was occupied by Southport Brewing Company. At that time, there was a variance granted for that patio area. The applicant seeks to expand by an additional 400 square feet that our regulations permit. The new patio expansion will eliminate 2 parking spaces, and they received approval from the Zoning Board of Appeals to reduce those spaces. We did provide in the agenda link materials some views of when, during COVID, Blackstone's occupied space even larger than what we're permitting now, occupied 5 parking spaces, which is an area greater than what they are proposing. And that tented area can be seen in the agenda link materials. We didn't have any issue there, but it's a smaller space, 400 square feet, occupies 2 spaces, and the ZBA granted relief for those 2 spaces. But if you are inclined to approve this application, we would recommend the standard conditions that we've had for everyone, the annual recertification, no additional signage, no outdoor music or sound.
Thank you, Mr. Wendt. May I have a motion on the item? Commissioner Levy?
Move to approve.
Move to approve, with, I assume.
With the usual
Yeah,
conditions.
of course. Move to approve with, conditions by staff, second by Commissioner Braun. Commissioner Levy?
Yeah, they, have the, variance for the 2 spots. It otherwise meets our, new regulations, and people seem to like outdoor dining, so I'd approve it.
Commissioner Braun?
Question, so the total outdoor parking is 400, not double what we have, it's 400. It's just that they're using 2 spaces, that's why they needed the variance.
They have more than 400 presently, but they've already previously received a variance for those spaces. So the 400 feet of additional space under the new protocol wouldn't necessarily require space, but those spaces are gonna occupy 2 parking spaces.
But don't they need a variance for the extra 400 feet, or no?
They don't. We looked at that, and because if they had 400 before, now we're expanding, then yes. But it's kind of reversed. They got the variance for the prior occupancy, and now before the regulations changed.
Okay. Well, it seems like it wouldn't interfere with parking in that area, and it seems like it would be safe with the way it's located, so.
Yeah, our experience, or their experience, I should say, is when they were occupying 5 parking spaces, they didn't have any issues, and now they're only occupying 2, so.
Okay, thank you.
Any other members of the commission? Put this to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye or raise your hands. See 7 hands, so it passes unanimously. So, moving on to public hearing, 277-301 Berkeley Road, zoning compliance application of Berkeley Road LLC pertaining to the construction of a 40-unit residential development pursuant to Section 830G of the General Statutes in the Residence B zone. This is continued from our last meeting on May 9th. We are now in our public hearing portion. I will open it up to the public. Open it up to the public in person for, and I'll ask that anybody who's joining us remotely or remotely, if you can please sign in the chat to indicate, if you want to speak on this item. But I will open it up because we have public comment at this point. So yeah, just one at a time, come right up. If you can just give us your name, your address, keep comments obviously germane to the issue, but feel free. Commissioner
Point of
Harrison.
information, will the commission have more opportunity to ask the, applicant questions?
We have rebuttal. Well, I mean, I guess it depends on where we go today with, public comments. Should we get finished public comment today, or then yes, we go right to rebuttal.
I have several questions.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good
Hi.
evening, Jennifer Barrymore, I live at 74, Cardinal Street, which is about 3 blocks from this proposed project. I'm also representative on the Fifth District PM. I have really serious concerns for the safety of the scope and size of this project, on Berkeley. If you know this neighborhood as well as I do, if you haven't been, I encourage you to please go. I've spent 9 years walking, my two to McKinley every day, back and forth, taking our lives at times into our hands because there are no sidewalks in any of that whole block of neighborhoods. It's actually how I first got involved with the town and Bill Hurley and the police department, with my grave concerns that a child is going to be killed. That the way that many of our homes are, and it's small lots, the parking situations on various sides of the street, and people cutting through there, going crazy speed, trying to avoid the McKinley traffic sometimes, or the Ward traffic. I actually pulled up a Facebook post from just this past fall with a mother saying, I live on Greenfield in the corner of Berkeley, which is exactly the intersection we're talking about. I have watched 23 cars and 2 mopeds in the last few hours come through, and not one stopped at the stop sign, the 4-way stop sign. I won't read the whole thing. Another one said, I live on Berkeley too. I hold my breath every time I'm at that 4-way stop sign, hoping that the other person will stop too. Not to mention how cars speed up and down Berkeley like it's a Grand Prix raceway, despite the hills and kids playing and dogs being locked. I have no problem and believe fully in 830G, and that we need to have a better affordable housing plan in this community. But the size and scope of that project for that residential neighborhood is just not appropriate. I worry about the number of parking spots. I worry about the side of the streets, the children playing. We have scores of public school students at all elementary, middle, and high school that live in that neighborhood and who walk to both Ward and McKinley, and just ask that you take that safety consideration under advice.
Commissioner Braun?
I have a question for you.
Yep.
And thank you for your service to the town. I heard at the last hearing that this road is a shortcut from one place to another. I don't remember which direction it goes from and to. Ward would be up by Melville side, and McKinley also?
Yeah, Ward is at the top of Melville, so because there's several that are perpendicular to each other, Berkeley is one, Marlboro Terrace is another, and then it goes on to Old Stratfield, and then, Lenox, which is the corner where I live on, and then, Naps Highway. So all of those roads have similar speeding problems that get you from Melville over to the area of like Aldi and, yeah.
Because the traffic report indicated that 60% of people going in and out of this new development would enter or egress to the south, which I think is towards Aldi's, right? And that also is coincidentally where a lot of cars were parked in the traffic report. And when I was there on Monday, middle of the afternoon, I saw cars parked all over the place. Are you aware also if any of the existing houses have been vacant for a while? Because when I was there were 2 or 3 vacant houses that were under renovation or something. I don't know if they were vacant when the traffic report was done or not.
I don't have information on that, I'm sorry.
Okay. Do you feel cars go 25 miles an hour?
Oh, God, no.
Or 26, I'm sorry, they said it was 26.
I find that impossible to believe. I mean, I advocated for on Lenox to have the police do a study, there. I mean, unfortunately on that, you can see it coming and people slow down before it's tagged, but, I mean, like I said, I've been advocating for the town for speeding issues because our neighborhoods are, I mean, I had to call the police on someone who was probably going 45, 50 miles an hour up Cardinal in front of where my 2-year-old at the time was playing, and slammed on her brakes and told me to go screw myself. Those were nice words. She didn't use she used worse words, and who was I, the effing police, and all of this. So it's a real problem. We love our community, we love our neighborhood. They're small lots, our children, it's a communal, we have block parties, they play with one another, they're often in the street, there are no sidewalks. So this woman said, it's not my fault your kids are in the street. Well, when you have to walk to school on the street, what choice do you have? Thank you.
Commissioner Harrison.
Hi, good evening, thank you for being here. I had a question. How long have you been advocating for some kind of safety study by the police?
I would say 6 or 7 years ago, it's the first time I contacted Bill Hurley.
Okay. And that didn't happen, or?
There's a lot of, well, we don't control the state, the state controls the speed limit, and we can't put, stop signs actually show that they don't reduce speed, that they, you should plant trees. Well, in the meantime, we have Eversource and Renault taking out trees, so plant trees, that helps with speeding, try these other things, and the police will monitor for a few weeks, and then they disappear, and so there's just not been a long-term solution that has addressed this issue in this area.
Commissioner Francis.
Long ago, when there were no sidewalks, the Board of Ed had to provide a bus for children to get safely to school. That isn't the policy anymore?
No.
It used to be.
We've walked, our path was
Yeah.
Cardinal and Lennox up, and, we actually tried to pick the streets that had less cars parked in the side. So a lot of those houses have 1-car driveways, and they have 2, so they're parked, and you still have cars tearing down, and you're trying to squeeze your children between parked cars to walk to the school.
Yeah, I did a site visit. It's heavily parked and it's narrow. Yeah.
Commissioner Collins.
I went to the space, and it just so happened when I was there, it was the drop-off of the children, and it seemed like, a good number of children live in that street there. Also, they weren't abiding by the speed limit as far as I was seeing, just the 15, 20 minutes I was there. Is there quite a few children on that block as far as like getting dropped off by? And one other question. Also, like where I live, it's a big rites of passage to walk your children to the school, because so is that during like the peak commuter time as well?
I was most familiar with, in elementary, it was, the kind of 8:30 to 9 range, and then in the afternoon, 3:30-ish, give or take. So, Berkeley is south of me, I guess, actually, so I'm not sure of the volume coming up, and I think more people drive their children, frankly. The line at McKinley was a nightmare, because it was like taking your life in your hands to walk your kids to school,
Right.
especially from down there. So, I don't know, I don't have the data, the public school data to show how many kids live on that. I know anecdotally, because I have one now at Ward and one at Tomlinson, that they have peers that live on the streets.
If I'm not mistaken, I didn't really see any posted speed limit signs between the proposed development and the houses on that side and the other side. Are there signs, like a speed limit sign?
There's usually, I don't know if between Melville and, I can't say for sure, but there's probably one per block, I would imagine. I'm not sure. We had asked as part of the study is to post additional, speed signs, or have the ones that kind of flash that indicate that you're above the speed limit.
Commissioner Braun.
Question. So if you're walking from, say, this development to Aldi, half a mile or so, or,
Not even.
and this is promoted as a walkable location. You can walk to restaurants, you can walk to the bank, you can walk to grocery stores. You're saying there's no sidewalk on either side of this road? And right now, cars park on both sides at random times. When I was there were a lot of cars parked on the road. But in the photographs in the traffic report, they show a lot on the south side, not as many on the north side. North meaning towards Melville, south meaning towards Aldi's, I think, from this site. If there's more overflow parking from this development, which could happen, it's claimed that there's enough on site with 51 spaces for 43 bedrooms. I think our regulations normally would require, and Mr. Wentz can verify this, 2.5 spaces per unit, which would be 100, I think, for 40 units. And this provides, 51 for 40 units, which is, I think it's more than half, but it's a lot less.
Right.
So, and obviously with HS30G, we can't impose our zoning rules, but we could impose safety. So if there were, say, 40 or 50 cars, where would they park along that road? I mean, would it fill the road based on your experience of going down that road? Right now, it seems like there's a lot of cars parked on the road.
I would imagine, depends on the time of day you visit, you know, with people who are workers. I don't go on that road as frequently as maybe others that are here to speak about it, who could say with more certainty. But I also, you know, there's a lot of utility vans, people who leave for the day, who work. So I worry about not only the inadequate parking for residents perhaps, but their visitors, where do they go? And just the narrowing with cars then presumably having to be on both sides all the time, narrowing that lane.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Harrison.
Yeah, thank you. One more question, sorry. Did you read the traffic report from the applicant?
I did not.
Okay. My question was gonna pertain to the traffic, but, okay.
I perused, I did not read the whole
Okay,
thing.
no worries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we'll just go, you can come up next, that's fine, just.
My name's Joe Gilliardi, and Julie Smith's my wife, and we live on 50 Brooklyn Road. I sent a copy of this as a PDF, I don't know if anybody got that, but, I wanted to review, some of the concerns I have, which are predominantly a safety issue in the area. I've been on that block for 35, 40 years, and, I never pulled into that driveway on the proposed lot. I did that the other day. I think it's okay.
Go right ahead.
And, I took a sedan over there and I backed in. I took a van and I took an SUV. And my goal was to say, what does it actually look like when you try to pull out of this driveway? Which is on a decent slant. And when I pulled up to the car to the right, towards Melville, I was blocked by, quite a bit of vegetation, 2 houses down. And, at the time, there was only one car parked on the right-hand side. So I brought 2 more cars down, and I parked the cars, and I was obstructed. So, not wanting to rely on anecdotal information, I contracted out an engineer, and I asked them to, review the documents provided by the developer. And, the initial reply was, it's in compliance. Okay. And I said, did you include any vehicles parked on either side of the property? They said, no. I said, let's do that. Let's take a look at what the numbers are, and do that. So this first page that you'll see here is, looking out right as you pull out, you can see of these 4 positions, 3 are in violation of line of sight. And in order to see, it looks like here, although I don't have a specific number, a vehicle has to be pretty much in the middle of the street to be able to see anything coming. The next page shows opposite direction, trying to pull out towards Island. And the same exact problem occurs. Vehicle 3 cars parked in front of the proposed dwelling will significantly alter line of sight. So, looking at there's also a page, if you come look at the satellite image, you can see, somewhat more detailed what it might look like in terms of line of sight, infringement. So, I looked at the plans and the studies that were made, and it didn't look to me like they were incorporating traffic parked on the street and the assessment of line of sight. There was actually one statement made as a warning that their information did in fact not have vehicles on the street when they made the assessment. And they said something like, well, those cars will be parking below, on the premises. So, I took a look at that point of view from an assessment of walkability. And, I used Google and I used, Zillow and a few other services to identify walkability factors for the area. And on a scale of 100, that location comes up with 79. And 79 is considered highly walkable, very convenient. And this first map out here is showing how many locations with under a 10-minute walk you can access from the property. And from that, you have McKinley, you have daycare, you have the bus transit, you have Walgreens, Stop Shop, Aldi, and Tunstall Hill Park, all walkable from the location. The next thing I wanted to get an idea on is that, walkability is something that's promoted. It's a location that has value for renters. And when you profile what those renters might be, you can assume some might take advantage of the fact that they can commute using public transport. And in order to access that, and there's a map here that shows this, it shows that and as discussed, there are no sidewalks whatsoever. So we also can assume that those people might be traveling early morning and evening, so there'll be pedestrians on that street, more than likely in the evening as well, making it incredibly dangerous as a location. There's a map here that shows where exactly there are sidewalks. You can see the X here on this map here shows the proposed, I think, 40 feet, if that, sidewalk proposed on the location, and no sidewalks available through Greenfield Street up to Kings Highway. So there might be, it seems, I'm not sure, if there's an argument that says there's not going to be any need for these cars parking on the street. And when I was looking at the size of the parking spaces allocated, they were all 18 feet deep. And so I looked up, I say, pickup trucks, bigger pickup trucks. The pickup trucks are up to 19.6. So is it likely that there's going to be, tenants that have pickup trucks of that size? Of course there is. So the only accommodation for them is going to be parking on the street. Another factor is simply convenience. When you park down in that 24 spots that are outside, I guess, that the most inconvenient way to get exit from that, the park there, is to come up to the street and then come into the front door. So if I was negotiating a good parking spot to get into the front door of that location, I'd park in the street. The door is right there. Why wouldn't I access that? Now, I'm sure that the developer doesn't have the ability to say, no parking allowed. They can't control that factor. So I'll go to questions, but, in summary, this is an incredibly dangerous prospect. There's lower density in this area.
Commissioner Brenneman.
Just a couple questions about the materials that you submitted, and thank you for submitting that. So you show, on the first page, is that a diagram of a car turning right out of the proposed driveway?
Yes.
Okay, and then there's a parked car that's assumed to be obstructing the line of sight.
Yes.
The motorist who's coming out of the development and turning right.
Right, there's three parked cars.
Okay, and that the only, unobstructed view is if there's no parked car there.
And that's questionable, because there was something about using the town property as line of sight. in the documents. And I didn't quite understand what that meant. When I was there looking, the only way I could see anything with no cars was I had to look across the front of what I assumes to be town property in order to see any oncoming traffic. But the argument seems mute because there will be cars. There's no way to control not having cars. And once you put cars on the street, the visibility goes away. The line of sight is seriously altered.
And then your second page shows a car similarly trying to turn left out of the development.
Correct.
And then the third page is a composite of those two?
That's, yeah, the third page is a satellite image representing that same data on a sheet.
And, did you take into account the location from which, line of sight is measured according to certain, any guidelines or standards in terms of where the car has to be in order to measure that line of sight?
We used the same numbers that were provided by the engineer who did the developer work. And I think there was like a 3.5 foot height, based on the slope condition. So my engineer used the numbers that were available.
Okay. And who was your engineer, if I may ask?
I contracted with a company, a civil engineer online.
Okay, and can you provide any more detail about that?
His name is Jing Yu.
Yeah.
He's a civil engineer.
There, that's the applicant.
I contracted with him, maybe about 3 weeks ago. We've gone back and forth on, putting these data points together.
Is he with a company or is he on his own?
He's on his own.
Okay.
And is he a licensed professional engineer?
He says he is. I haven't seen a license.
Okay. And would you be able to submit, information about his credentials?
Sure.
Assuming that the record remains open. And then, I guess, that's my last question. Thank you.
You said you previously provided this information?
I sent, attention to the .org. I sent all these PDF files, attachments, with a cover letter explaining what we're talking about right now.
Mr. Went, have we previously received this?
We have, yeah.
Okay, that's fine. I just wanna make sure, especially if to make sure the applicant received a copy as well. So that's fine. In reviewing the materials, though, it appears, at least especially on that composite, as, Commissioner Brayman had said, having one car length on either side obstructs the line of sight. Does 2 cars obstruct the line of sight?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's up to it's the third car, if you're out toward the middle of the street, you're gonna get a view.
Yeah.
And I think there was some argument too about, and I didn't quite understand this, like, how many feet are required for traffic coming down Berkeley to see someone pulled out? And will it be safe? Will there be enough room for a car to stop in time when they see someone coming out of that property? And that number, when I looked at it and looked at where all the available parking spots are and where the available places are to pull off to allow someone to go by, that is 260 feet away from that site, that location. That is just close to the corner of approaching the property. And what I didn't put documents together about that, because it was difficult to do, to say, like, where, at what point will someone stop, have enough time to stop, pull off to the side of the road, and where on that road is available slots to actually pull off. And there's one property that has to have 2 driveways together. And that's like, when I come down, that's the one I use. I come down off the hill, and if I see someone coming up the street, I pull off to the right, and I wait for that to pass. And that happens 80% of the time. Someone's gonna have to pull over to allow the other car to pass. And, it's not a lot of room. I mean, if you miss the 270-foot mark, I don't know what happens. The cars come in, they're gonna face each other. Somebody's gonna have to back up. That's kinda how I see it.
Thank you. Unless you have something else. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see it. Commissioner Braun.
Quick clarifying question. So, the plans that you show on your first 2 pages, those actually started with the plans that were from the applicant, and then the engineer put these, sightline,
Correct.
things on them?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the engineer put together the table that says, based on increments, what the actual site distance is,
Oh.
and then eyesight for parked car, and you can see there's violations up to the fourth vehicle, or the fourth position. And
By
they don't,
violations, you mean,
you can't, there's no visibility.
okay, of someone exiting, okay.
And this is the same, when I looked at what the engineer did, I requested to use the same methodology,
Based on the 26 miles per hour,
Exactly.
okay, so that was not been questioned in your engineer's methodology?
Correct.
Okay, that was found to be low based on reality, then it would change things for the worse, I imagine.
I mean, for me, I've been clocking myself coming down that hill off Berkeley, I live up towards Melville. And it's too scary, you know, you drive too fast down that hill, I brake going down the hill, that causes me to get down to about 27, 26 miles an hour, I can see where they came up with the number.
Yeah.
But I can't test it to go in the other direction, but coming down the hills, like, you know, I don't tend to accelerate going down hills anymore.
Is the hill on the Aldi side or the Melville side? I mean, which
The
way?
hill comes straight, it starts on Melville as you're approaching Kings Highway, which is the old
So you're going downhill towards Kings Highway?
Yeah,
Okay.
a severe drop.
Okay.
The road is quite dangerous area
And
as well.
just because you know the neighborhood so well, if you added a, like, 30-foot wide sidewalk, and just knowing how people walk now, are people gonna stop walking on the road, get on the sidewalk, and then get back on the road? How does that work? How do you envision that working?
Well, right now,
Yeah.
people pull over, they'll take their dog and their kid, and they'll just move up, and they'll try to get behind the car to provide room.
Right. But if you have a sidewalk suddenly appearing, like an island of a sidewalk in the middle of no sidewalk.
You mean the sidewalk proposed by the developer?
Yeah.
What,
Would people be getting, if you're walking down you walk down that road?
Yeah, no, I would never use that. It's like only 30, 40 feet long, it's like, it's the length of the developed property, so like, it doesn't take you anywhere.
Yeah,
You know, why would you access it?
okay.
But, yeah, I don't know whose obligation it is to put a sidewalk in.
I'm not sure.
I don't know.
I assume they did because sometimes they would be there very well, not they?
Yeah. If it was a new development and the infrastructure was being created, the town would have a sidewalk. Well, it's not a new development. And, so it's kind of a big question for me is that, you know, without a sidewalk, I think the level of danger is significant.
Actually, when I was driving down there, I noticed that the existing houses there, and by the way, there seems to be confusion over, is it two-family homes and one-family home? I've heard 3 different versions in all the application material. I don't know if there's 5 units, 6 units, or 3 units, but what?
In the current property?
Yeah, there's 3 homes.
I think they claim to be 3 two-families, but I'm not.
I think 2 well, it doesn't matter, but there was a place that you could actually pull over right there. There was kind of like a wide driveway for one of the homes. So if you had to pull over, you could pull over.
This is in front of the property?
Well, right now, the way it is now, laid
Yeah.
out before the development happened. So you actually could, I think, pull over into one of the wider driveways right now to get out of the way of a truck or something like that.
Right.
Okay,
No, I think before, if you don't mind me answering the question you had
Yeah.
before, there's a property across the street from the development. And it was like, it was marked as blight at one point, but then a contractor came in, another contractor came in, and an individual came in and purchased it. And that's being renovated right now. And that doesn't contribute at all to parking.
right.
That's gonna be a two-family and a single family. And it doesn't look like, it looks like only one unit's gonna have a driveway. So the area is gonna continue to expand in density, even without this development project.
There are a lot of two-family homes in that area.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well,
Good evening.
Hi. So, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Good to see both of you. My name is Jay Wolk. I I live at 1157 Stratfield Road, and I'm a representative in this 5th district on the RTM. So, I think one of the questions I heard Commissioner Braun ask, one of you asked, is, do you take this road off? So the answer for me is yes. I took this road, I take this street when I worked at SCAP up until last month when SCAP was sold, down this road most of the time, coming home from SCAP to go back to Stratfield Road or going. I don't go on some of the other roads like we mentioned, Old Stratfield Road, like my colleague on the RTM, Jen said, because of speeding. Speeding on Old Stratfield Road is a real problem, and it's a problem on this road. The hill that we've been talking about, and you brought up, this hill, when I go at night, when I came home from work, and during the wintertime when it's late, I flick my lights off and on before I even go up the hill. People are speeding going down the hill, and I do it the reverse. So, I don't want to reiterate to a lot of what everybody's already said, but parking. When you drive, I'm not sure if everybody's driven down this road, this street, but when you drive down the street, some of the vans are jutted out into the road, so the road is not a complete road. It's almost like it downsizes. So when you're driving and you're coming towards SCAP, which is Tungus Hill, and people coming from where you, Commissioner Braun, are talking about Addies, and coming up that way and then making the right turn onto Berkeley, there's no room for two cars to get by at the same. I've almost been hit twice. I haven't spoken to the police, to the chief or anybody about this. It's a problem. So now putting this unit, I have to say before I finish, I'm not against affordable housing. I'm for affordable housing. I'm for safety first, then housing. And us on the RTM already approved affordable housing in the neighborhood right around the corner from where this is gonna be put. Seems like a lot of affordable housing is coming into the Stratfield area, which is I'm for it, as long as it's safe. Where are the cars gonna park? So I think somebody mentioned, where are these cars? If you put this unit in, you gotta figure it's gonna be more, two cars per unit, friends coming over. Where will they can't park on the road now? So it is a problem. I saw the property, I viewed it. The other thing we didn't bring up, anybody brought up, is wetlands. We have a real issue with the Rooster River in our neighborhood. And I don't know if Bill Hurley has looked into the back of this property or where this is gonna be built, in wetlands. So I know the other, affordable housing that is going in, there is no flooding there, and that's why I voted for it, but, so that's something we may wanna look for, but anyway, I appreciate everything that you guys do in serving the town, and it's a real help, and thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other member of the public? Don't be shy, step up. Good evening.
My name is John Materla, and I live at 181 Berkeley Road. First of all, I'd like to thank the Commission for taking the time to hear our concerns. I'm here in opposition to the proposed 4-unit rental complex at 277-301 Berkeley Road. I am hopeful that you have had time to review the information and the photos that I've already shared with you in 2 emails that I sent the Commission. Being respectful to the Chair's request, I am not going to reread all the detail in those emails. However, I would like to touch on some of the major points in those emails, and would be happy to entertain any questions from the Commissioners regarding more encompassing information that I've already provided. The 2 primary subjects are health hazard and safety issues that will result from the proposed development. Regarding the potential health issue caused by the proposed site, there is detail provided regarding the exposed trash dumpster, its location next to the children's play area next door, and the potential rat infestation from the adjacent wooded area. I respectfully request that you forward this concern onto the health department for further consideration before any TPZ action. Regarding the traffic safety hazard, there are several irregularities or omissions in the applicant's traffic access impact study. Number one, as I've conveyed in photos, you've heard a lot of testimony already tonight, I have submitted to the commission the applicant's depiction of the parking situation on Berkeley, which is grossly misleading and does not portray the real-time conditions of the street. You'll note in the photos that I've provided that the parked car is lining the street. There is only room for one car to proceed down the street. If a car approaches from the opposite direction, one must find a spot to pull over in a driveway or back up to allow the other to pass. This happens very frequently. You'll also note that the road is shared by many dog walkers, bicyclists, skateboarders, and kids playing. Point number two, the applicant's radar traffic volume study was performed during the height of the pandemic in November 2021, when restaurants and workplaces were shut down and traffic was minimized. The applicant's 20% adjustment for the post-pandemic traffic is arbitrary and unfounded by data. Point number three, the proposed site access driveway to Berkeley Road is an extreme safety hazard. The exit from the site is very dangerous to motorists on Berkeley Road, pedestrians crossing the site. The driveway is pitched back into the property, and a driver exiting the property is traveling uphill. This not only impairs their vision of Berkeley Road traffic, but also limits their ability to see a small child crossing the driveway via the proposed sidewalks across the site drive. The exit visibility is further reduced by the parked cars at the curb adjacent to the driveway opening. I explain in detail in my emails to the commission why this will certainly be exasperated by the proposed 40-unit rental development. Cars will be parked at the exit driveway opening. Point four, a fire at a 4-story building would require a large hook and ladder fire engine to address the top floor. There is no fire lane in the proposed parking area, and it seems nearly impossible that such a large piece of equipment could make the turn into that lot and down between the parked cars. The applicant has implied that they've already received approvals from the town engineer, police chief, fire chief. At this point, I'd like to thank Director Wendt for recently uploading the additional information and the appendix that was missing from the initial meeting upload to the web. However, in that appendix, in the email from the town engineer that was portrayed as her approval, she indicates that she has not yet visited the site. It hardly appears to be an official approval. I can find no documentation to substantiate an approval of a police chief or a fire chief. The neighbors and I would respectfully request clarification to this to the chair. Point five, I'd like to present to the commission, for the record, a petition signed by the residents of Berkeley Road and neighboring Marlborough Terrace. It is important to understand, see the pages, it's important to understand the context of those signatures. The petition reads, we, the undersigned, present to the Fairfield Planning and Zoning Commission this petition in opposition to the proposed 40-unit rental apartment building at 277-301 Berkeley Road, presently before the commission. Please note, it is not a petition in opposition to Connecticut State Statute 830G or the Fairfield Affordable Housing Initiative. It is a petition in opposition to the hazards of health and traffic safety that will result from the proposed 40-unit apartment building in our family-oriented residential neighborhood. I am a believer that one has an obligation to not only identify flaws in a situation, but to also be part of the solution. I would like to suggest that it could be financially attractive to the applicant to build a series of duplex homes on these sites Or, I would suggest that the applicant refer to the concept of Pine Tree Apartment Complex on nearby Pine Tree Lane as a model that could minimize the health and safety concerns and possibly be welcomed by the community. However, in its present proposed state, I think that, as I have noted in photos and testimony, the analysis and findings of the applicant are flawed and require a more thorough review and corrections. I believe that these photos and testimony and the additional testimony that you have and will hear from my neighbors would meet the burden of proof for quantifiable probability that there will be harm to the community if this project is built. I therefore respectfully request that the Commission employ the help of the Fairfield Health Department, Fairfield Traffic Commission, the Town Legal Counsel for that further review, and respectfully request that you reject this 277-301 Berkeley Road Complex proposal. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions, and I submit the petition and my speaking notes to the Commission.
Give it to, Ms. Keough.
Thank you. And I did have, I have one neighbor also, while I was gathering a petition, did send an email to the Commission, but they're out of, town on business, so if I can submit that as well, I appreciate it.
Thank you. I don't see any hands, so thank you very much. Gentleman in the back. Is there anybody else? Feel free to, yep.
Hi, all.
Good evening.
Steve Reisinger, I live at 258 Berkeley Road. I lived in this house since I was pretty much born. My grandmother, I bought the house from my uncle and my father when she passed away. I think everybody here is in favor of affordable housing. However, I don't believe 40 additional apartments is necessarily the best interest of the neighbors or the future residents of Berkeley Road. We already have traffic and parking concerns. 10 more cars on this street makes this street unparkable. I have 2 trucks. Where do I park them? It's not going to be a battle for parking spaces. My wife, my son, and my dog like to go for walks. I'm terrified when they go out for a walk. Terrified. My son goes to school in the morning. I check to make sure he gets there every day walking to the bus. I say, call me when you get to the bus stop. I can't walk with him every day. I'm afraid he's gonna be killed. Cars do not stop flying down that road until sometime after 11 p.m. My truck has been hit 2 times. 2 times on that road. I'm fortunate the police tracked down one of the hit people. The other one we never got. When does it stop? 10 more cars. I have nowhere to park. Where do I park? The next street up? Is that where the next cars go up? Do I park my truck at Aldi's? Do I leave it there and get towed? Safety. It's just scary. I don't ride a bike in my neighborhood. I go to a park, because I know I'm not gonna be run down on the road and left for dead. There's an environmental concern. The current owners, who I presume to be the future owners, whenever they do any remodeling over there, that garbage ends up on the street. There's been a water tank there that's sat for 3 weeks. Luckily, a scrapper came by and took it. But there's still a vacuum that's been there since, I don't know, March, early March, still laying there. Never been cleaned up. Is that what we get to look forward to? Because it doesn't seem like things are being taken care of. What's this gonna do to the neighborhood? I don't see it as going well. If the current trend of maintenance and taking care of things there continues with the new building, I'm afraid. Do I have to build another driveway? What's that cost to me? There are no sidewalks. The street, a tree went down on a neighbor's property, fire truck showed up, a police car showed up, street's impassable. Cannot go by. They stay for 10 minutes. You have 2 choices. Hope that they move the truck. Hope that the driver in front of you is brave enough to try and squeak between the two, or turn around. The fire department, the ambulance, and the police are constantly on that street. Constantly on that street. It's shut down once they get there. This is not the neighborhood for a 40-unit, 4-story apartment building to be built. I understand the need for lower-income housing. I own an apartment, a set of apartments myself that I rent out. I don't charge exorbitant rent. I know it's hard to get by. But this 40-unit is not the answer. There's so many apartments going up in Fairfield. This is not the place for it. I'm concerned for the safety, the environment, my vehicles. It's too much, and I beg you to consider that. I also have a few other concerns I'd like to bring up. I don't know if you were aware, but is there a parking fee included in the rent for this apartment complex? And if there is one included, and the tenant is able to opt out, where will they park, and where do their guests park? Because there really isn't much overflow parking. And right now, like I said, 10 more additional cars on that street, there is no parking. It's done. So I urge you to consider that, and if you have any questions, and my truck, before somebody had mentioned the size of the truck, my truck, and he's on site 19 foot, it's not unreasonable. There's a van across the street from me, an extended van. There's another builder across, there's another guy who's a contractor, all pickup trucks. Where do we park? Where do we park?
Commissioner Braun, go ahead.
Question. The traffic reports seem to collect data on traffic volume during peak hours in the morning, of between 9 and 10. That seems a little late to me for a working class community, because I can run whatever I want, whatever. But I think most contractors leave much earlier. So I was wondering if you had a comment on that, and also, I was there during the afternoon on Monday. I didn't see a lot of trucks, but probably was during the workday. So, do you have any comments on the average person who might live in that road, and where they would park their truck, and what time of day they would park their truck?
You know, guys come and go whenever they come and go, but I'll tell you, I don't, if I move my truck, I'm always worried, am I gonna get it back? A lot of times I leave one truck and I just use one, because I can relocate that. I can block my own driveway, but what do I do? Right now, currently, I'm having my driveway repaired. I have to park 3 cars on the road. What happens when somebody else, the new development that's going across from that other one, they're gonna have to have their driveway done. Where are those cars gonna park? When was that study done? Was that done during COVID?
They did the traffic data collection with radar,
But you have a date?
between November 19th, 2021, and November 27th, 2021, so it's basically Thanksgiving week, more or less, you know, the Friday before and the Saturday after Thanksgiving. And it was 2021, so, yeah, people have mentioned it was during COVID.
And that'd also be a flawed time, don't you think? A lot of people travel during
Yeah,
Thanksgiving.
but, so my question is, when is rush hour, because, in your neighborhood?
Rush hour starts 7 in the morning
Okay.
and goes all day long,
Okay, thank you.
all day long. Thank you. Can I submit this, please?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Keough. Gentleman in the back. Good evening.
My name is Jim South. I live directly across the street from this project. Of course, it's very obvious. The first thing I'm gonna say is the view is gonna be blocked from the autumn leaves. It's like the George Washington Monument compared to the houses in the area. The one on the right is a small cape of this project. The one on the left is like a ranch with a, probably a living area basement. street, at that particular spot, shows right on the plan, narrows down extremely. I made some copies of that part of the plan.
If it's already in record, you can just refer to it if you like. Feel free to give us whatever you like, but
Oh, okay.
your call though.
I just, I marked it out, copies.
No, that's fine. If you can just start with Commissioner Braun and we'll pass it down.
Oh, okay. I don't know
I'll pass
if
it
you're
down.
here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I used to plow that once in a while, that parking lot, when the owner that I knew quite a while ago, was truck would be down. And what the gentleman mentioned about the view, is very true. I have a couple of pictures of that. In particular, as you're coming out, you look left, because that's traffic that's coming close to you as you come out. Go ahead, a couple more. And up in the shuffle, I guess. This one picture shows the incline as you go in the decline. And what that gentleman mentioned about the visibility, I'm standing at the curb, looking straight at the curb, at the telephone pole. And you can see the difference in the incline, and in the decline.
Did you go?
And this is a picture,
Yet?
if you pull out,
If you can, sir, we just have the microphone there, so I want.
Are these all the same pictures?
Oh, you can hear him? Okay.
Oh,
good.
My mistake. Please continue.
if you pull out,
I'm sorry, are those all the same pictures?
Are these all the same picture here?
that is, yeah, I think
Okay.
so. This one I only have one of them.
This first picture is looking into the current driveway of 277 Berkeley.
277, and the next one,
From the road.
291, between them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Looking towards
You're looking,
King Highway.
I'm looking
You're looking
straight,
south,
I'm actually looking south, and to the left is the driveway going in.
standing at 277, looking
Yeah.
at the
Correct.
driveway.
Now, this one's at the far end, close to the curb of, that would be 291.
Still looking towards Aldi's?
Yes.
Okay.
And you see the visibility.
Just tell me when you can't hear him.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, especially on an incline. I think they might level it off some, but
Will we get these scanned?
Yeah.
Into the record? Okay.
That's why I'm giving it to Ms. Keough. This is the only one. Oh, I'm sorry, this is the one they gave us, first one, this is the second one?
this is pictures
Okay, so.
1, 2.
just,
She
north
has
of my
this.
house.
You have this
Looking
one?
at the traffic to the south, looking north, I'm in.
Just make this sure this gets to me.
And you can see
It was a door, it was a phone, I think.
These are all the same.
I think it was a ringtone.
Looking,
I'm looking north,
where are you standing?
I'm standing.
I'm trying to make sure it gets to Ms.
That
Keough.
would be, 315.
Past the property.
Yeah, the
Thank you,
property,
though.
yeah, this would be the property here, that's the first house.
You're standing south of the property looking towards Melville.
Yes.
You're standing on the other side of the road.
Maybe let's just make sure the record's clear, what you're describing in the
Maybe you can
photos.
label it, might be helpful, just so we're,
Well, that's gonna be picture number 3. So
Picture number 3, he's standing on the other side of the road from
can you give me one, please, so I can.
the subject property,
so I can get
looking north towards Melville.
that.
Correct.
thank you.
That's 1, that's 2, this is 3.
This one she has.
That's 1, yeah. That's gonna be 3.
Yeah.
3, thanks. Sorry. Took one to that.
this would be still my property, only I'm looking in the other direction, I'm looking south with the traffic part.
And where's the subject property here?
That's my house there.
Have you seen these already?
Like 300, oh, you mean there?
Yeah.
That would be right here.
Quick question,
In fact,
sir.
This car,
Sir,
this car would be right in front of the
Mr. Schultz.
301.
Okay.
sir,
Yes.
these are new to us, right? These weren't previously emailed to us?
Correct, yeah.
Okay, which is, feel free to give as many as you like. If it's possible, can we distribute all of them, and so we all have them in front of us, so we can go one by one?
I don't have that many.
Which is fine, yeah, but whatever you have, so we can distribute it, because talking to Commissioner Braun,
Oh, I'm
a
sorry.
lot, no, that's fine.
Yeah.
The people on the other side, it's just hard to follow, so to
I was
speak.
trying to clarify.
No, and you're doing great, Commissioner, don't get me wrong, but if we, submit as many photos as you want, but if you can, let's distribute them all at once, and then we can go through them one at a time. And we can share, I don't mind that, but, that way you're explaining it to
All right.
everybody that can look at the photos.
Well, that was picture 4, and that was standing,
This is picture 4, sorry, Kathy.
yeah, and that was standing on the same side.
I was
Which one is
looking
this?
south this time.
You're standing just
Towards-
north of the property, looking south towards, towards, all.
Is this a kitty cat
I was
on
in front of
the,
Yeah.
is it? How many animals live on that street? Is that, so I see a little kitten or kitty cat here. How many, a lot of families have pets too?
Some do, yeah.
Dogs, cats,
Gerbils. There's deer,
pardon me?
there's deer.
Yeah.
And you go in the woods, certain time of the day, there's 8 or 10 deer, does mostly. I haven't seen a buck this year, you know, and some just little, woods.
Obviously, they're crossing the street a lot, the cats, the dogs, things like that.
This one does, yeah.
Yeah.
One,
Just,
Not my
one
cat,
person,
but
if we could just have the public, the gentleman talking, if anybody else wants to come up, that's fine. But I just wanna make sure all the comments are captured on the record.
yes.
What does picture number 5 depict? It looks like a black and.
Hold on, good,
It
can
just
we,
shows it's only, you can only put one car in there. If you have 2 or 3 cars, they have to park on the street.
Okay.
That's perfect. Thank you.
Thanks. Oh, one car in the driveway. Mr. Saltzig, is
Yes.
this this house under construction in picture number 4? Is that right across from the proposed site?
It's the one to the right of this main one. That's being restored, rebuilt. Yeah. And there's also one more, speaking of that, there's
Two
also,
of them.
yeah, there's one in the back,
Yeah.
this one, and then there's one down the street, but I don't know the number of it, I can't find the number.
Yeah, no, I
That's
saw
being
that
all
too.
redone. So that's 3 that aren't occupied, so that's cars that aren't there right now.
This is really tall, I thought.
That's a 2-family, but it's on the hill, and there's windows in the roof, I think,
Yeah.
but I don't know if there's living area there or not. This is the most important one for the width of the street, other than, these are all the same. I'm looking north toward Melville from my property.
What number are we up to?
6.
I want you to see the difference in the curves. You see where it's wide here, and then it comes restricted. It goes down to like 28 feet, 11 inches from 31.
Directly across from right in the middle of, right actually where you would be pulling out to make, if somebody was leaving and taking a left towards
Yes.
Aldi's,
Yeah, that's the tightest spot right there. Well,
they would be right across from the narrow part.
yeah, it gets wider down here, right.
Yeah. But if you're making a left out of the property.
That's where it's all restricted.
I mean, a left, yeah,
Yes.
towards Aldi's exiting the property.
Yes.
You'd be at that narrow spot,
Correct.
where the orange dot is on your
Yes.
map that you
Yeah,
gave.
if you look, it kind of comes to that.
No, there's another orange dot
It restricts, yeah, it comes,
farther down, on the same side of the road as the property.
yeah, and it restricts it on this side of it.
What do the 2 orange dots represent on
The
your
curves
map?
where where like funnels in a little bit.
both sides.
Okay. Thank you.
I think that'll do it for pictures. They talked about, the fire and the police, and, one gentleman, I spoke to said something about, they have a sprinkler system, in the, where it's gonna sprinkle in the cars in the, call it a basement or not. But there's only one egress for in and out, it's the same one. And, I guess there's dirt on the inclines of the property, on the sides, on the right and left elevation. So you can only go, there's no way to get out except back out and go through that one door, which I thought was kind of foolish. I should think they'd have another exit, one at each end somehow, for safety. And, there are children definitely children on the street. And once in a while, somebody speeds, I can attest to that, as well as, you know, lady and gentleman. And one time I was going to work, I was leaving my house, going toward all these, and on Greenfield, I didn't get quite up to the stop sign yet. Somebody zoomed up that street. It's the only time it ever happened to me. But I was thankful, and thank God that day, because if he wasn't doing 80, I thought the policemen were behind him. That's how fast he was going. Fortunately, I didn't see any police, but he did go up that fast. People do run that stop sign quite a bit. They're usually doing 35 or 40 on their way to work. I don't know if they're much of a hurry to get home, but on the way to work, they do it. If you're gonna have this property there, and, for 40 years, it's going to be, I guess, part of it's gonna be affordable housing, I would think they'd have some, kind of services for the electric vehicles. I don't know if there's anything in the plans or not, I don't have all the plans. You would think they'd have something like that. And the dumpster, what I could see is, I see two doors open, but I don't know if it's one dumpster or two. I don't know if they have a recycling dumpster or not. And it's right close to the building, so in the summertime, you're gonna get that smell. There's windows on the back side of the building. If they don't have their air on, you get some kind of odor. Of course, you're gonna get the flies, and being next to the woods, you're gonna get the rodents, and you'll probably get some, raccoons, and, some other animals too. Somebody says there's a few, coyotes that come around now, which you haven't seen. So people, if they go out there to, put garbage, they're gonna have to watch themselves to be careful they don't get bit. That's a possibility. It's snow in the winter. When you come out of that driveway in the winter with snow, the snow's built up, and it makes it even worse. And the other thing I noticed, the way the cars are parked there, if you spin your tire, you can slide into the next car, because it's on a slant, it's on a slope. It's possible to hit the other car, you know, in the winter time. And like everybody says, there's gonna be more than 50 cars. Because from what I've seen when I walk the neighborhood, the two families, have maybe five cars or so, and, you know, one family's have 2 and 3 cars. It's the area, people are coming back home to live with their parents, some of them, and I imagine it would be the same in the apartments. I mean, if 2 people are a couple, they're gonna have 2 cars most of the time. It's 1.3 cars, I shake my head at it. I don't think it's, for this area, you know, the community that we're in, I don't think that's the right, prescription, so to speak, for the amount of cars. times now, of course, when it's a holiday and you're having a party or something, I'll have to walk a little bit before I can find a parking space. I don't have a driveway to park my car. And I understand that because it's only, a few times a year that it happens. I certainly don't mind, especially with friends of mine. In fact, they'll invite me to the party.
Good question, follow up on that.
Commissioner Braun?
Are you saying that you don't have a driveway at your house?
That's correct.
Are other houses don't have driveways?
There's one more that doesn't have a
So
driveway.
there's no choice but to park on the road?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. And then there's
And how many vehicles per house that don't have driveways, do you think,
I would say 2.
per house?
With mine, I used to have 2, now I only have the one. My wife passed away. Well, I was wondering if they were gonna have stickers, or some kind of decal for the cars that park there in the lot, so you know whether they're, from the complex or not. That was a thought. And the other fellow mentioned whether they're gonna be paying for, well, like when you go sometimes to a motel or hotel, you pay a parking fee. That was a question too. Will they be doing that? And visitors, where are you gonna put visitors if they visit? They're gonna have to park on the street. Nothing like I mentioned at the charging stations, mentioned the blind spot. I think that's, the other people covered quite a bit, the young lady covered quite a bit, the gentleman did. I'll let it go with that. I wanna show you that, especially that narrow spot right there. Thank you for your time and listening.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for the pictures.
I can't explain it like they do, pictures help.
Absolutely.
Thank you for your help, young lady.
Try.
Pen, sir.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
How you doing?
Good evening.
Peter La Sorenza. I'm one of the owners for 268-270 Berkeley, located across the street from this property. We rented out to 2 families, which I'm proud by. One family is a mother and father, 2 young children, like another resident is a single mother with 3 children. We've owned the house since 2018. Some of my concerns are all about safety, all for affordable housing. I'm happy that one of the residents participates in the housing program, which is great. But in terms of safety, when we were showing the apartments out to prospective tenants, I purposely parked way further down the street to show that there was hopefully more parking for any tenants looking at the property, knowing how tight it is. I'm there on the weekends, cutting the grass, doing yard work, doing maintenance, purposely make sure I'm not blocking any of the neighbors, their parking spots, just to kind of be convenient and save space for them as well. But it's very tight. As mentioned earlier, we have a few tenants where we've had medical emergencies, fire trucks, police cars. The road does shut down. It's not very wide. We're not talking about, Park Avenue, Mill Plain Road, Stratfield Road. We're talking about Berkeley Road. This street is narrow with cars parked on both sides. Definitely a dangerous hazard, where if I had children, I would certainly be nervous about putting them on the street, going to school or just playing out in the yard, and whatnot. And just in terms of the hill, hopefully most folks here have driven down that. I was there this past, on the 15th, which I think was a Monday. Had somebody drop something off the house. We had to get some work done, and I intentionally called the person and told them to go very slow down that hill because they were not, driving down that road. That's how much of a concern it is for me. The person that was coming to meet me, just wanted to kind of reinforce that, as well. Just in terms of safety, I just think that was one of the biggest, concerns kind of on my mind, for this address. Thanks.
Hello.
Good evening.
Calvinitis, and I live at 329 Berkeley Road, which is 2 houses from this proposed development. And reiterating what everybody here said about the safety, this is personal to me, because I have 2 young children that live with me. And I did send the commission the email on Friday, quite extensive, but I included pictures of what it looks like when I take my daughter for a bike ride. Because in order to get to the park, I have to take a right out of my house, I pass by this development, go up the blind hill everyone's been talking about, and to get to Tunsis Hill Park. My daughter's wearing her helmet, being safety, and as you can see in the pictures, we pull over to the right where there's no cars, when there's another oncoming car coming, because there's no space for 2 cars, plus cars parked on both sides of the road. And when the picture, we're on the side where the car's right in the middle of the street, and in the other picture, you can see when we ride the bike, we're literally in the middle of the street, because there is no sidewalks, not only on Berkeley Road, but the adjacent road, that's Marlboro Terrace, Old Stratfield Road, Lennox Road, and, you don't see apartment buildings on any of these streets. They're all 1 to 4 family dwellings, no more than 2 stories tall, and this proposal is a 4-story building. Doesn't look in the middle of Berkeley Road, it's not like in a corner, at the edge on the main, on Greenfield or where Melville is, it's like literally in the middle of a residential neighborhood. The health concern about the garbage is there, I'm pretty close to that spot, so I guess if there is gonna be any smell, I will be affected by it. They're gonna be looking down on my property from the height, I guess, because my deck is kind of elevated, but this proposal is gonna be like 40 feet tall probably, if not taller, and, what else is it? I also have a dog, so we walk our dog. We literally have to walk in the street. So that's the concern that I really have with my 2 young children. We don't walk to school because we do drive them, but most of the time when I come home from work, these pictures were at 6 p.m. when I took my daughter to the park. So you can see the cars that are on the street right now. And as my neighbor Jim mentioned, he doesn't have a driveway and his car's parked there, and I feel bad when I have a lot of family gatherings. I almost don't have enough space when I have a few cars for my family to park on the street. We're literally blocking 4 cars in my driveway, 1 blocking in, a couple cars over. My previous neighbor on my left, he had a basketball hoop that's like on the street of Berkeley. He left it there for me and my kids. We're out there shooting hoops sometimes. Yeah, I put the signs out there that says slow down on both sides, but again, we see the car coming down the hill, I told my kids right away, go to the sidewalk. And the proposal that this project has, 40 units, I don't know, these 51 parking spots, 19 below, whatever, and 20-something outside, there's probably gonna be 80 to 100 cars for these 40 units. There's not, a couple living in a 1-bedroom is gonna have 2 cars. I have 2 cars, I park usually one of my cars on the street currently right now, because my wife leaves before me sometimes, or I leave before her, I don't wanna block her in the morning. So, where are these 10 cars we said was gonna make a problem based on, you can see the pictures that I saw on Friday. I'm thinking there's gonna be 30 to 40 additional cars on the street. Where are we gonna park? How are we gonna walk safely? Because if there's a blind spot, when you said walking or running, there's a lot of people running, exercising on these streets. It's not just our street, they're all from our neighborhood. It's not just my Berkeley Road neighbors that are running on my street or walking their dogs. It's from all around my neighborhood. Where are these people gonna go? Someone's gonna get hurt. I'm praying it's not my family. My kids are very young right now, and we go to the park often still. There's a park right, and I'm pretty sure a lot of the kids, we walk to the park. We don't drive we take our bikes to the park or our scooters to the park. And the pictures could prove that my daughter's on the side right here, the car's right there, and that's my number 1 concern. The parking is the other, the traffic study, done in November, they just said in November of 2021. During a holiday season, during COVID, I was working from home, so my car was probably in the driveway not being affected by the study they did. I will make a new study done, either by whoever does it, either the police commission in the city or the Fairfield Traffic Commission, as they said, needs to get an updated study of the number of vehicles that are on the street now. Because COVID's been lifted, there should be a new traffic study done with that. And like they said before, there's already been an 830G, I'm not opposed to it either, so they just approve them, it's gonna be right in my backyard. I used to have a nice view of the forest, now I'm gonna have construction going on from Greenfield Street that was approved, and they took half an acre of the park, which I guess was illegal, because there wasn't supposed to be, that park should not have been touched, and taking half an acre of the park for another project that was, I don't know who owned the project right now. But my email had a lot more concerns, the health concerns, the wildlife concerns, because we do have deer. Deer's constantly on my property. Deer's constantly on my neighbor's property. I go out on my street, I see lots of deer, I'm happy to see the deer. Is this project gonna affect, the wildlife from the Wetlands Commission, I mean, from the wetlands area in the back? And I don't think a complex of this size fits with the location. It's in the middle of the street, that many units, that many cars, that many more blind spots for drivers to get into an accident. The blind hill is a very concern. I go twice a day up that hill. I go slow as well. I've come to a stop, because when there's two cars parked on that hill, again, it's a one lane, you're coming down. At night, I think it's safer, because you can do your high beams and you can let somebody know that you're there. During the day, you can't. And if the car's coming down too fast and you're going up too fast, someone's gonna get hurt. That's my time. Thank you. Any questions?
I have a quick question.
Sure, and there's no time limit, just so, you know, if you're done, that's fine, but yeah.
I'm done.
Commissioner Braun.
What time do you think, peak travel is in the morning?
Well, sometimes when I go to somewhere, I leave at 6:30, and there's already, some of my neighbors are already walking and driving on that street. And other times I leave at 9:30, sometimes I leave at 8:30. I leave at different times, because I guess my schedule allows that. But I would say anywhere between, I leave at 6:30, and I see traffic up there till 9:30 when I leave sometimes, so.
Commissioner Levy.
Yeah, if you're going to Tungus Hill Park, you go up Berkeley
I
to
do go.
Melville, and then
That's the
to
way
the
I
park? Is there any, paths or any, shortcuts, or do you have to go that way?
There's no shortcuts to the woods, but, you could go the Greenfield way and that way, but we usually go this way. Sometimes I come back the other way.
Oh, Greenfield will take you down the Villa, right?
Take me down the Villa, and then you take a right, and then you take another right, then you go up the hill. We'd rather just go up our hill, and then it's mostly downhill from there, instead of traveling always uphill. Then coming Greenfield is too much of an uphill for my kids to ride their bike, so we usually just, the same way I go, we come back, because the Greenfield Hill area is, the Greenfield Street is much, the slope of it for my kids won't be able to ride their bike on that hill.
Yeah, plus there's that busy intersection too.
Oh, yeah. Well, and there's been, in the corner of Greenfield and Berkeley, I'm only 2 houses from the project and 2 houses from the corner, there's constantly cars doing U-turns there. Whether it be from the backup of the park, the car wash that's in the corner down there, or what, there's always constantly cars doing U-turn at the intersection. And, somebody I know recently, there was an accident there. This is not a quiet, I felt like it was a quiet street, but there's just a lot of traffic. On the weekends, you can see how many people walk by. There's constantly cars, constantly people on the street. And the amount of traffic that this project probably would bring it's gonna be a very life concern for me. Like I said, it's personal, because I have young kids.
Is there a bus stop on the road?
I think I live too close. I don't know if there's a bus stop on my road, not for McKinley or for Ward. I think we're too close. My wife, but there is?
There's one, from Melville, you hit it to Berkeley. There's one right
You wanna just identify yourself
Yeah,
for the
just come up.
record, Mr. Wolf?
jaywalk on the RTM,
That's fine.
57 Stratford Road.
Yeah.
Yeah, we usually drive, and there's a lot of traffic in the morning, as they previously said, because of the traffic going to school at those times. Nash Highway's very busy, so a lot of people are picking up either Greenfield Hill, then they turn over to Pope or Vesper, or all those streets, they all get congested during rush hours in the morning, during school hours.
One more question. One of the prior speakers from last time mentioned water problems during rainy periods. This street goes downhill towards where you are, and I'm just looking at the plans. I didn't realize this, but it looks as though they have to, the parking garage makes it really 5 stories. Except in the front, the street is elevated from the back of the property, that goes to the open space area. So it looks like the parking garage is gonna be dug into the ground, so that when you look from the road, you only see 4 stories, although it looks like it might be almost 50 feet tall or close to it from the street. But the side view is, the parking garage like gradually becomes open air towards the rear of the property because of the slope of the land. And then it looks as though they're blasting in, or digging into, the earth, to do the parking garage. It's really a below-grade parking garage on the
Yeah.
first half, the way it looks in the
Correct.
plans to me. So, do you have a concern about water going
Well,
down?
I did, and I
Yeah.
spoke at the Wetlands Commission, because when I bought the house with my neighbor next to me, there was a stream under my property that we talked about, that we asked them to do
What
a
address are you on?
it's not a real stream, it's like an old stream, it's not, there's not actually water, but there was
But what address are you talking about?
329 Berkeley.
329?
Yeah, that goes into my neighbor's property and into this property where the thing is, and they dug a hole and then they covered it up, and I don't know how the Wetlands Commission passed it, they said to do a second study with sonar, I don't think that was ever done with the wetlands, I know they said they looked into it, but I said, what about, backup of water, because if there is a thing that's gonna affect my property too, and I will get flooding, because right now don't get flooding, if they do this project, and they start digging below ground, and they stop some kind of, who knows, underground stream, will that back up into our property set?
So that's a stream.
It was an
That
old
runs
stream.
sideways from your
Yeah,
property?
well, right, in my backyard, it's in between my lot, and it goes to my neighbor's lot, and it goes into the other project.
Yeah.
So there was something, I spoke at the Wetlands Commission about that, my neighbor did, we said they would cover up a hole, they were trying to cover up a lot of situation with that, and I don't know how they got past that, well, they didn't get past it, it's in litigation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tom? Sure.
How are you?
Good evening.
My name's Tim Krasowski, I live at 315 Berkeley Road, abutting property to the right of 301. A lot of the topics that I'm concerned about, a lot of them were already mentioned. There's a few that I'd like to take note of. Let's see. As far as the traffic study and soil test that was done, so already spoken about, right at the end of the pandemic. The soil test was taken during a really long drought. And I think that's gonna have a lot of impact on the proposed, property as far as the parking lot, in the left rear corner of the property where the fire department would pull in and back in, on these, particular kind of pavers. In my opinion, I don't think the pavers will work properly unless you have a lot of that stone dust underneath, which will defeat the purpose of the pavers. Let's see. Tim Bishop, this was after the first public hearing for conservation, Tim Bishop stopped by the house, he's the, conservation director. I showed him the pictures, I showed him the holes, from this mentioned, waterway coming across our backyard. Okay? He said, I showed him the holes, he said that he was going to request, a sonar study, done by the developer, to see where the waterway went to and where it comes from and whatnot, but that wasn't done. Let's see, my property now is very wet in the back and floods with heavy rain because those holes were backfilled. Right after the first public hearing of the conservation, when I had brought this up, on a Saturday, the owner, Lucas, Papa George of 301, he had a couple of his guys there on a Saturday, digging up the holes and backfilled them. I have pictures of that, which I'll give to you in a minute. Let's see. The proposed dumpster is gonna be right next to my swimming pool, in the back right corner of the proposed property. At the last zoning meeting, someone was concerned about the lighting as far as, the wildlife. I'm an electrician, I know a little bit about lumens and lights and, the powerful lights. Of the wildlife, with owls and all kinds of stuff as well. Concerned about the safety of our children and the traffic and parking on the street, as everyone was mentioned. It was mentioned at the last zoning meeting a couple weeks ago that there were no accidents on the street, which isn't true. I have a picture of my wife, getting T-boned right at the corner of, Berkeley and Greenfield Street, and I have an accident report here. Also, the underneath parking, as far as like electric vehicles, I don't out is water. So if there was a, electric car that caught fire, it's gonna be a disaster. Okay? And it's really, it's like 20 feet from my house where there's, it's gonna be. As far as the bus stop, my son, went to Ward, and the bus stop was at the corner of Ridgely and, Marble Terrace. And he had to walk from my house in Berkeley up around the corner to the bus stop. Also, on our property line, there's a large oak tree, which is a little bit more on my property than theirs, I believe. I'm a little bit concerned about that, as far as like shade and stuff. My grandmother's 94 years old, actually she turned 95 yesterday. You know, she likes to sit underneath there in the shade. If this project goes on, you know, I don't know what's gonna happen with the tree. And who deals with that, and who's liable and responsible for that. I'm hoping that, you know, the board does their diligence and, takes into consideration to do a new traffic study and a soil test. I think it's very important, and if not, I have plans to appeal if, it's not done so. Over here is pictures. I did them in color. Ink's expensive, otherwise I'd have one for everyone.
Do you want to go through the pictures, maybe just, show them to us?
Yeah, well,
Picture one.
I gave some pictures as far as
Could
the
you
wildlife.
describe them and identify them just to make it a little,
Just say, picture one is this, picture two is this.
Okay, so picture number one is a picture of my wife's car.
maybe write a number on there so we can identify it later? Sorry.
It's fine, no.
Picture number one is a, picture that I had taken at, 6:01 PM on November 21st of 2021, which is right around rush hour when people come home from work. Her car was totaled. I have an accident report for that. The accident report is, picture number two. Picture number three is the picture that I had taken over the fence, right next to the oak tree, where the stream that I had mentioned, goes underneath of our back property. It's about, 3 feet deep, maybe, 2 feet wide, a nice stone wall built on each side of it, and it was capped with bluestone, and then there's, about 12 inches of dirt and grass over that. And I stumbled upon that, like 20 years ago, when I was messing around with my backyard. So, like I said, after the first, public hearing for conservation, they came right out and they were trying to cover some stuff up. So they dug the holes up to find out, you know, to see the holes themselves, but then they didn't even do the diligence of putting the cap back over it with the bluestone so that the water could flow and filled the hole right in with dirt. But in other words, cork did. That's picture number three. Picture number four is a picture of an owl, a big barn owl, breaking on my property. You know, that's like the lighting situation. Picture number five is, myself sitting in the backyard at the picnic table underneath the oak tree, and there's a deer 5 feet from me, just hanging out. You know, my family and I would like to see the deer and the wildlife. And then, picture number six is another picture of, in the backyard, there's actually 2 deer right in this little fenced-in area where I have 2 chickens. And they're very friendly. So, this is pretty much all I have.
Oh, great.
Right now.
Commissioner Harrison?
Yeah, I have a question. So I think our area received about 3 inches of rain this Saturday.
Right, it was very
What
wet
was,
out there.
yeah, can you describe the conditions after that rain during, like how the flooding was like?
Well, before they had the tills and the holes, it wasn't as bad. You know, but it still got pretty wet back there. And now it's like it takes a couple days to dry out. And if you were to walk back there, like to feed my chickens, you know, you just go right in like 4 inches, you know, right into the mud. You know, it gets even worse, like to the left of my property, which is years ago.
Do you get any flooding or anything like that? Okay.
Also, I noticed a while back, I think this was when they were like doing the studies for the proposal of this project, it was, fell out in the woods, like around like the stream that runs into Rooster River, is we put up little yellow tags that's marking where the wetlands are. That was done, during a very long drought, like a 3-month drought. And you could totally see now where their marks are, it's like, it's a lot wider. I mean, there's skunk cabbage and it's really wet.
What was the time period for that drought?
Off the top of my head, I don't know, I could,
Last year?
I might have taken some pictures, so I could, get
Last
back to
summer,
that.
wasn't it? Last summer, that one?
It was,
July,
I would say
August,
no.
September?
no, this was a couple years ago,
Oh, okay.
I believe. Yeah, that was the last year.
Thank you.
Just to clarify, so your property is right
315.
south, right south of this property, or
It's, if you're looking at.
301 is the subject property?
Right, I live right next door. 301 used to be our property, we sold it,
And you're at what, 305?
315,
Oh, 315,
right,
okay.
the abutting property.
You're saying there was a water course that ran through the backyards of all the property, up through, I guess, probably,
Going to like heading towards Greenfield Street, but it flows down from Greenfield Street, coming across our back properties, like my neighbor Milton, that was up here, or,
but Greenfield Street is downhill from you. So it
Well,
starts up higher and
right, so
goes down.
if,
It starts at somewhere north of this property, I would assume.
so it goes pretty much, I'll do it in blue.
Does it go to the rear of your swimming pool or to the front of your swimming
To
pool?
the front. It pretty much goes like this, this is 315. So that's my house, right here, this is the street, and it comes across, flowing this way,
Yeah.
across our backyard.
Where does it go down?
Correct. Towards the property, the development property.
Wouldn't it flow towards your property if you're downhill?
No, it's coming from like Greenfield Street,
Oh, okay.
going down into
Oh,
the
I see,
wetland.
okay. Oh, I see, okay.
Right. So now that, right about
Make sure
here,
it's, Josephine,
where those holes were, and they backfilled, now it's getting
or
dammed
just
up.
tell it out in
I'm
front of
getting
you.
more water in my backyard.
But the holes were test holes, right?
Well, when I spoke with Tim Bishop, they weren't supposed to dig any holes. And when I mentioned that to him, he said that he wasn't under the, he didn't know that. That's when I took some pictures and I emailed it to him, I never heard nothing back.
So the holes were test holes, probably? Or, you don't
Well,
know?
there was one hole that I showed him after the first public hearing for the conservation. It was a hole, like it kind of like sunk in, and a ground hog was going in and out of it. So I showed him that hole. It was actually like a traffic cone shoved in there, so no one could step in it.
So it's a naturally occurring hole,
Correct.
and that's where water,
We're kind of caved.
that's part of the sort of,
That's part of
water course
the
system.
waterway, correct.
and that's what they filled in, okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Just. No, just come on up and, I know you.
To address it at the Wetlands Commission, but I live, again, on
Can you identify yourself again?
Yeah, just,
Stephen Wright, Jr., 258 Berkeley Road.
thank you.
So I live opposite the development, we were facing the development to the left, 2 houses down. My backyard is a hill, that hill is constantly wet all the time, water is seeping up through, so there's no denying there is a spring underneath that whole Trail area. I believe it was called Gypsy Springs, back, you know, when my grandparents owned it. I don't know if it's even mentioned today, but it would be considered, in my opinion, wetlands. If I step back here today, the ground is so, that front lawn is not wet, but that back lawn is wet. The hill is always wet. Water is a constant source of problems in the neighborhood. My house has, what they call the old curtain drains to the basement. Luckily, it doesn't flood anymore. My garage does. Seeps in from the bottom. So there is a spring there. There is water there. And I don't believe that the Wetlands Commission addressed this or really looked into it. I think I just wanted to bring that out and make you aware of that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Chuck Elliott, 50 Berkeley Road. Has Wetlands approved this project?
Well, as I understand it, there's been an approval that's been on appeal at the Superior Court. So that's my understanding.
Yeah, I just have some information to add to the drainage issue. I built a house up at 48 Berkeley about 10, 12 years ago. And in the excavation for the foundation, the excavator hit the back corner of the property. And it's about a 10-foot diameter pipe. It looked like a pipe had just been blown. Water was streaming out. And it turned out that it wasn't, in fact, pipe. It was underground water. So I was a little concerned at that point, but before the put a foundation in, I went to the town, I pulled, records about the size of the watershed that contributes to Berkeley and that lower section of Berkeley as well. The watershed extends all the way up to Ward. It's a huge, huge area where water contributes to that Berkeley Road area. I've spoken to neighbors in the area, and Connecticut Basement visits Berkeley quite often. There's a serious water problem. I had, in my particular situation, I had to put a special kind of foundation in where it was all stone. I happened to sell a piece of property recently to a contractor adjacent to mine, and he had the same exact problem, serious water. And then I found out that the whole area is considered, from an insurance point of view, high water area, not flooding, but high water. They don't consider, like, not hurricane level of insurance requirement, but high water area. So that really made me suspect about some of the information that was being provided in terms of how water was going to be managed at site for the development. And I think the language was state-of-the-art drainage system was going to solve this problem. And I don't know what state-of-the-art means. I don't know if this means bleeding-edge technology that's unproven, but it's, quantifiable probability is the word that's floated around. I don't know any data, I don't see any data points that support that drainage system as state-of-the-art that's going to deal with this massive issue. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Braun.
Can you just identify the location of where you were excavating?
Yeah, so it's 50 Berkeley.
Are you an excavator by trade?
No, I hired an excavator too.
Pardon me?
I
Oh, you hired? Okay. You probably told me what you did in the beginning, I told us, but, so what address was that at?
That's 50.
I'm
That
sorry.
was 50 Berkeley Road, and then the adjacent property, 48 Berkeley Road.
Okay.
Both of which, 10 years ago, one was built, and then the other one is being built right now.
Is that in the vicinity of the water course they're talking about? It seems like a.
Yeah, there's the whole, when you look at the watershed is absolutely huge. They all contribute and flow down, so there's underground streams all over. So, for example, on that 50 Berkeley, they would, maybe 50, 60 years ago, even 70 years ago, there was a stream, and the stream was covered up by someone who wanted to put a driveway. So they put the driveway in, they put the garage at the top of it, and they shut down that water area for drainage. So it went subsurface. So I don't know how frequently that is duplicated in that area, where there was water, it was dealt with by covering it up, and building, redirecting flow. So everybody down that Berkeley side, my side, and the Boston, all.
You're at 258 Berkeley, right?
No, it's 50.
Oh, I'm sorry, I heard you wrong. So 50 Berkeley is the other side of the road and
It's
closer to Belleville.
Closer to Belleville.
And that has.
That has to be, the whole area does.
Commission.
Yeah, I just was Googling, so I was intrigued to hear that there were some springs there. Does Gypsy Springs ring a bell in that area?
Was met
Well, I know, there's the
I've heard of it.
Rooster River, but that's a whole, almost a different area contribution to the water area. That's coming in from like Tungus Hill Park was all marsh at one point.
Yeah.
The whole thing was marsh. And then, so they filled that in, they landfilled that in. They altered water flow dramatically through the development process over the years. And, you know, some of the consequences are Berkeley suffers from a lot of water problems up and down that street. So, like I said, how the state-of-the-art drainage system is being proposed on this site, I can say it's just suspect to me without the details of what this really means, but I'm not sure how they're gonna handle it. I don't even know, like, if it snows, are they gonna have excavators pulling snow out of there? Is snow gonna be backed up into the drainage area? Do they account for, like, mounds and mounds of added water flow specific to their drainage system? I don't know the answers to those either. Thanks.
Waiting online?
Sure.
Yeah, so it's, if we have repeats, I would like to go to people who have been waiting online, or, so I'd like to have anybody who hasn't spoken yet speak, and then there have been people waiting. I'd like them to have,
One quick last comment.
if it's quick. Okay,
And please identify yourself again.
yeah,
Sure. Tim Krasevsky,
yeah.
315 Berkeley Road.
If you just closer to the mic.
Sorry, Tim Krasevsky, 315 Berkeley Road. One thing I forgot to mention was, I'm concerned about the AC condensers. At the last hearing a couple weeks ago, it was mentioned, questioned by by one of you guys, and they said that there was no AC condensers. Being in the trade, I'm an electrician, I don't understand how that's possible, not having any AC condensers, and where they'll be. I'm assuming that if there is, that there's gonna be many of them right next to my property, on the backside of that building, along with all the gas meters and everything else. I don't know if that's a health concern. I do know that there's, as far as, you can't have an AC unit, no closer than 6 feet from a window. My house isn't 6 feet from the AC condensers, but if there's many of them, multiple of them, 40 of them, does that change anything as far as, safety and health?
Thank you.
Well,
Let me ask, as I said, I don't mind doing people in person first. Is there anybody else who has not spoken yet that wishes to be heard? Come on up, yep, I just want, if somebody's wants to go twice because they forgot something, want to add something, normally you like to ask go once, but if you're gonna come up twice, I'd like to go to people who are waiting, to go first.
Hi, my name is Mira Elzinati, I live at 95 Berkeley Road. I wanted to voice my opposition to this development project just because, just to reiterate what everyone was already saying, I'm sorry to repeat what you've already been saying, but I think it's important, just to show that how many people agree with each other in the neighborhood, that, the neighborhood is not necessarily, I just really don't think the infrastructure of the neighborhood is made or was built to accommodate a 40-unit apartment building, and that it's honestly reckless to induce more demand on the roads than they were engineered to accommodate or to handle. There are gonna be a lot of cars parked on the street, even if they have a 50-spot parking lot, and, almost everyone on that street has either a pet, a child, or both. Like, there's a lot of kids playing in the street, there's always people walking their dogs, there's a lot of cats running around the neighborhood, and they're not stray cats, they're people's cats, they're just indoor, outdoor cats. Like, we have 2 indoor, outdoor cats ourselves. They never stray necessarily too far away from the property, but they're in the street sometimes, or they're in the driveway. But, yeah, there are a lot of pets, there are a lot of kids, there are a lot of cars already, and, we just don't need more cars. And I just don't think an additional, 100+ people in the neighborhood I don't think it's gonna be able to accommodate that. And even if this is being touted as a walkable location, we live in a car-dependent society. Most people are gonna have
have more than one car, even if it's quote unquote walkable. Like, we all live walking distance to Stop and Shop and Aldi, and I would bet you almost everybody here takes their car to the grocery store. Like, we do. Okay, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else in person wish to speak first time? So we'll go to, people who've signed up remotely.
We have a Sammy Sayal.
Mr. Sayal, can you hear me? Mr. Sayal? Are you still there?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, excellent, thank you. Thanks for taking the time, and just thanks to all the neighbors out there as well. My name is Sammy Sayal. I'm here on behalf of my parents, Mohammed and Tahira Sayal, who live at 320 Berkeley Road, diagonal from the proposed project. They weren't able to attend due to their limited English, but they shared a few concerns with me that they wanted me to share with you, if that's okay.
That's fine. Did you say the address for your parents?
Yes, 320 Berkeley Road. It's diagonal from the proposed project. So their concern is mainly about safety. They've been living here since 1998. I lived with them from 1998 till about 2007 myself, and now my kids, visit my parents almost every other day. So their main concern is safety due to the increased traffic if this building is going forward. For basically what they said is, they would never have thought in a million years that, a building, would be built, especially a commercial building of this size would be built in the middle of their neighborhood that they've been living here for about 25 years. This street is filled with, many hardworking families. There's many kids that play in the driveways. Some of the houses don't even have driveways, and some have very small driveways, and that's why you can only fit maybe one car in the driveway, and the other cars are on the side of the street. There's many kids riding their bikes. There's kids playing basketball outside. And, whenever you have to, when a car is parked on the street because there is no other choice, you have to go into the street to go into the driver's side of the vehicle. So you're always opening the door. You're always looking behind your back to make sure, a car is not flying down the street like there always are. They've been there for 25 years. I lived there myself for, over 10 years myself, and I saw, what kind of, the issues that they had back then are the same as they're having now. The street is, pretty close proximity to, McKinley Elementary School as well as Fairfield Ward High School. There's no buses, for these schools if you live on Berkeley Road, and so kids are walking as well. My kids are going to be walking to, my parents' house in the next couple of years when they leave school, and I want to make sure they're also safe walking on these roads. This street does not have. Let's see here. Yeah, adding, if this building were to be proposed, 50 additional vehicles, on this street, where they're, when they have friends coming over, when they have relatives coming over, they're also going to have to park on this street. This is gonna, make the situation even worse. The other concern they had was the speed and traffic report that was part of the developer's plans. It's from November 19 through November 27, which was during COVID and also during holiday season. And many families go away, and there's less traffic, during these times compared to a normal time, like on a Friday at between 7 and 9:30 a.m. and 3:30 to 7 p.m. when I think those are the peak times when many more cars are on the road and driving at a fast speed. Cars park on both sides of the street. It's very difficult if a fire truck had to go through down this way, or any other emergency vehicles. I do want to share a picture of when I lived here. My parents still live here as well. If you have capability to view a picture, if I can share it. This was my brother's car that was parked on the street many years ago, which was hit by another car sideswiped. The car flipped over on Berkeley Road, and one of our cars from our house was totally damaged. So I'm going to share a picture, and if you can let me know if you can see it.
We can see it.
Okay, so that is right across 320 Berkeley Road. This car was only 6 months old at the time. It was completely not usable anymore. What you don't see is the car that hit this car. Because where it hit the car on the back left side of the tire, the striking vehicle flipped over, and it hit the two cars on our side of the street as well. So basically, we had three cars that were damaged in one accident, just because of the narrow street and there's cars parked on both sides. So this was about, I think, a little over 10 years ago. But even after that, our cars have been hit in front of our house. They've been sideswiped several times. Bumpers have been hit. The doors have been side scraped. Several times over the past, 10 to 12 years. And so those concerns, now we see even more cars parked on both sides of the streets now because of the increasing population as well. Adding a development like is being proposed is a pretty crazy idea, in a neighborhood like this, where there's kids outside, where there's people walking their dogs and kids riding their bikes. When there's snow, it's even more dangerous. There's only one path in the middle of the road for vehicles to drive through. Even now, cars have to pull to the side for one car to go, so it's not really two-way driving. Cars have to pull to the side for other cars to go by, and it makes it even harder for larger emergency vehicles to get through as well. So those are some of the concerns that they shared. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. I still go to my parents' house maybe every other day for my kids to visit, their grandparents. And, I share all the concerns with my neighbors, with our neighbors as well. So if you have any questions, I'd love to answer them for you.
Can you please email that picture to, what's the address again, Mr. Want?
TPZ Commission at fairfieldct.org.
TPZ Commission at fairfield.org. fairfieldct.org. Can you please email that picture to that email address?
I will.
Great. I think we're all set. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Harrigan, do we have anybody else?
I don't have anybody else listed.
Okay, then let me ask, is there anybody participating remotely or by telephone that wishes to be heard on this Berkeley application? If you are joining us via telephone, please press *6 to unmute yourself. Is there anybody joining us remotely or by telephone that wishes to be heard on Berkeley application? I think I saw one or two other people that wanted to supplement, if it's quick. Come on up, sir. Thank you, Mr. Watt.
All right, thanks for listening to me again. I'm Jay Wolk. I live at 1157 Stratfield Road, and I'm a representative in District 5 on the RTF. So I just want to let everybody know that I've been involved with the flooding issue in our neighborhood. I've been to the town hall meeting. I just wanted to bring you up to date of what's going on and trying to alleviate what's going on and everybody's concern about the flooding. The flooding is all basically coming from the Mooster River. I did a tour recently with Bill Hurley and a lot of the neighbors. We went down to the back area of these people's homes, where Tuxas Hill Park is. There's an area in Tuxas Hill Park which is woods. You can see the woods from where Kohl's used to be, across the street in that old parking lot. You look back there, and there's all wooded area back there. It's all full of garbage. A lot of it has just been debris from just trees down. A lot of the Rooster River floods because of debris. I've seen it in person. I've been to a press conference where Bill Hurley has taken us to show us why these contributaries flood in our neighborhoods. That area down behind Tux's Hill, where I'm talking about, where the ball field is flooded. It's been flooded. It's been flooded for a long, long time. We had a big issue in town, I guess all of you realize, with the pickleball courts that are now gonna go into Tux's Hill Park, was a big issue because of the flooding. I'm not trying to alleviate Berkeley Hill's issue with everybody here, but everybody should know that, Bill Hurley, the town engineer, had said that there's gonna be alleviation with water shedding in that area, back in the wooding area, to try to alleviate the flooding. But however, it's not gonna stop the flooding completely. It's gonna slow down the flooding. And one of the people who talked tonight, brought up, it was a few years ago where we had that major rainstorm, which was just unbelievable. I've never seen anything like it since I've lived here for 20 years. And the housing, and by the way, everybody should know, the people down on Villa, behind Berkeley, and that whole area going down, are still suffering from the flooding in their basements from that storm. And this last rainstorm, the house, I did a tour of these people's homes and basements and what happens from the flooding. Anyway, I just want you to know that, this project is in wetlands. It's never gonna be dry. It's always gonna be the same, no matter what the town does to try to alleviate the flooding. So, thanks for listening to me.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Oh, Commissioner Braun.
There's a consulting firm that our town hired called SLR.
Right.
They did a study called the Tungus Hill Park Proposed Floodwater Detention Site. And I know that at some point in the last couple of years, we approved the conveyance of a parcel of land. I don't know exactly where it is. I think it's generally in this neighborhood. As additional floodplain. I thought it was closer to Villa Avenue.
It is.
But are you familiar with that study? Because what it mentions is, basically what you're talking about. The town was gonna build a temporary detention basin within the western portion of Tungus Hill Park in Fairfield. The town has retained SLR, their consulting firm, to repair the design. And Tungus Hill Park is a town-owned property located along an unnamed tributary watercourse to the Rooster River. It's located directly upstream of a network of residential streets that become flooded on a regular basis, et cetera. And I believe that the ballpark is sort of part of the open space area.
Right.
Separately
Absolutely.
managed. One, conservation runs open space, Parks and Rec runs park. But I don't know how many rivers or watercourses exist, but I suppose it's possible that the one that goes through number 50 and the one that goes through number 315 might be part of that network of watercourses.
The money has been appropriated by ARPA and by my body. The RTM has approved money, so this project is gonna be done. I'm not quite sure when it's gonna start. I'd have to ask Brenda, first selectwoman, she knows more about when it's gonna start, but money has been appropriated and that is gonna start. The Rooster River starts, everybody should know, I'm not sure everybody knows this, the Rooster River starts all the way up by the Trumbull Mall. It comes down the Trumbull Mall, it goes into Easton, it comes into us, into Fairfield, down Stratfield Road, where the mobile station is. By Owen Fish, the condominium by Owen Fish, those garages get flooded out by the brook that's in front of them, goes underneath Fairfield Woods, comes into my home, Dogwood Green, comes in as a big pond, goes over a dam, comes into a brook again that goes under Montauk Road, goes under Montauk Street, goes behind Assumption Church, which floods out part of the homes back there, and then goes back to where we're talking about, behind, Berkeley and in that area down to Villa, which goes into, I don't want to keep it, but goes into.
No, I understand, yeah.
And that's where, in Bridgeport, the homes down past Villa, they get flooded by this also.
Okay.
And the cemetery behind where the Miller Volkswagen is, gets off, the cemetery behind there where we all met was destroyed from the flooding, and that's because of chairs, tires, garbage, debris in the brook, so the water has nowhere to go but out. And that's what causing the flooding of the river. So, thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to? No?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is somebody new, this is your first time, sir, am I right, behind? Or did you want to do, oh, I'm sorry, I interpreted wrong.
My name is John Petrola from 181 Berkeley Road, and I just wanted to pick up on this conversation, and especially Commissioner Harrison had brought up the question of the spring, and I just wanted to put in context how close this project is to this. And I am familiar with this Brewster River Retention Basin project, and there is an open running brook, which is a tributary to that, laid out in the plans by this consulting firm, which originates right on the property line corner of this site. The contention is, that you've heard already, of this other stream that crosses the adjacent properties is with that. But that corner property, we can go there tonight, and the water is bubbling up out of the ground, feeding that open brook that runs through that open space of part of Tungus Hill Park, down to where this retention basin is going to go. So it is not, this project is sitting right on the origination, or at least that's where it exits the earth. I'm telling you, we can go there tonight, and it's bubbling out, feeding that brook that runs down into Tungus Hill Park.
Commissioner Braun?
I'm aware that, the wetlands maps for this property show wetlands in the northeast corner of 277, which is sort of the uphill. I don't know how it works in the backyard, it might be different topography, but there's an actual wetland on the site, and also, I believe the Rooster River, wetlands buffer is either 90 or 60 feet. And I know that it bisects the property sort of diagonally, and so basically this whole building and parking lot will eliminate much of that buffer area, the wetland review area, which is intended to protect the wetlands.
Yes.
And provide flood control, things like that. So is that where you're talking about when you say the water's bubbling up? Is that in the corner of 277, or is that somewhere else?
It's right in the extreme rear corner. It's not actually on 277 property, it's about 3 feet over the line into the adjacent property.
The wetlands are flagged, well, they flag wetlands, I don't know if they flag water courses, but they did flag wetlands on 277. But that's, and I do see from the SLR aerial that there's a wetland and water course that seems to originate there and ends up flowing towards the larger wetland on the open space area.
Yes.
Is it possible to add the SLR report into the record so we can refer to it? It seems to be relevant to what, the people are talking about here,
If you're requesting it, I think
as well as prior work we've already done in the area.
if you're requesting it, I think that could be okay, Mr. Wentz.
It's a logistic, it's a procedural question.
Oh, I don't see a problem.
No, I don't either. I mean, if you're requesting it, then we will.
I'm just requesting that the SLR report dated February 8th, 2022, called Tungus Hill Proposed Floodwater Detention Site, be
That's fine.
added to our hearing record.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other member of the public wish to be heard? Both in person and those joining us remotely or by phone, does anybody wish to be heard on this matter further? Not a lot of public input. Last call. Any member of the public wish to be heard in person or by phone or joining remotely or by telephone? If you're joining by telephone, please press *6 to unmute yourself. Okay, I'll close the public hearing portion of the application. Attorney Fallon.
Mr. Chairman, I know there may be questions. I then have a,
Oh, I'll just say one thing. The one thing I would like, that we haven't yet received from the public hearing was the credentials of the engineer from, I forget who the gentleman who.
Mr. Gagliotti.
Mr. Galley, if that is what I would like to get those, even though public comment portion is closed. If you can please email, submit that by email, to tpzcommission@fairfieldct.org. Website is the email address is also online, but I would like that, so let me put that on the record.
I was told when I was submitting that
You have
document.
to,
Yeah, I'm sorry.
in front of the microphone, I'm sorry.
That's
I
okay.
was told that when I submitted that, assessment, that the town engineers were going to review it for legitimacy. I mean,
Okay.
I will, of course, provide you.
No, if you can, and that could very well be the case that the town engineers do that as well, but if you don't mind being duplicative, that would be helpful.
Thank you.
Commissioner Harrison, before.
Yeah, just in the spirit of submitting things into the record, I just wanna make sure our entire affordable housing plan is in there, because I think we only saw cherry-picked parts from the applicant. I just wanna make sure.
If it's if parts of it is referenced, then the entirety should be in there as well.
Thank you.
Attorney Fallon.
So questions, I mean, I do have a rather.
That's fine, if you want,
Rebuttal, but if, you know, to use the time productively, if you have
I don't-
questions. Mr. Rose is with me here.
okay. Attorney Fallon's asking, I mean, is there does members of the commission wish to just dive in with questions? I think you have the presentation, but,
I have some questions.
so go ahead, Commissioner Harrison.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to the traffic study. Now, the premise seems to be generated on trip generation, and I'm just seems small, I guess, based on common sense. I've been out there a few times, and it just seems just very conservative. So you're using ITE data, right?
Correct. That's actually.
How is that, so I still wanna ask this, how is this applicable to Fairfield? Because as I understand it, ITE is picked from, you know, people, planners who submitted voluntarily from, could be LA, could be Wyoming. How is that applicable to Fairfield, Connecticut, to Berkeley Road?
I think the staff can elaborate on that.
Oh, well, I'm asking you.
But, yeah, no, but I think ITE, the Internet Institute of Transportation Engineers, is recognized as the Bible for establishing, based upon the use, it's not the geographic location, it's based upon the use, the amount of volume to be associated with a project. And in this case, and you recall the testimony that we even took a more conservative approach and applied a use that would yield a higher volume. We came to the 16 and 20. Commissioner Brun, you should know that it's a slightly different question, but we did study the peak time that we applied was 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. Okay, so that it wasn't 8 to 9.
Something said 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. for peak time.
No, it was 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. But getting back, Commissioner Harrison, to your question, the ITE is the standard by which every application that's ever come before you, whether it's been for a subdivision, an office building, a shopping center, we look to the ITE standard, and that's based upon the experience nationally of traffic engineers associating volumes with uses.
Yeah, no, I realize that it's widely used. I just, you know, I've read some articles about it. Some, you know, academics question its validity, and if it's, some have called it junk science because it's not really relatable to where
It's the only
it's
thing
being
we
measured.
have right now, but
No, I know that.
Mhm.
And it's continually updated. Every year, new information given and new volume of that bulk are given out.
And you're using
Can you just-
2011?
I'm sorry.
Just identify yourself, I know,
Patrick Rose.
yeah, thank you, sorry.
No, thank you. Just wanted to see what other questions I had. Yeah, how old is the oldest data in the 11th edition that you're using?
The oldest data,
Or when it was issued, the data was issued, 2 years ago.
approximately 2 years ago.
Okay, 2 years ago, okay. I mean, just 16 to 20 just seems super conservative, just, I've gone out there, you know, we've heard from people tonight who live there for many years.
The other thing I wanted to say, as long as we're talking along these general lines, is the counts that were actually taken and the speed measurements that were done, as Commissioner Braun said, between, I think the dates
for the 19th of November and the 27th of November, 2021. That 20% bump was not an arbitrary decision. That was a DOT mandated approach because we had to do traffic reports. And traffic reports were being done in that period of time. You've reviewed many of them, but I just wanted to make clear that 20% number was not something that was arbitrary. That came from the DOT.
Okay, thank you. Now, are there any independent variables specific to Fairfield in the report, in the traffic report, other than the ITE data?
The speed study.
The speed study, okay. And that was used with the radar gun?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And I think the chairman asked at the last hearing, you know, that was done over a period of time too, so it wasn't just a one-day, speed study.
And then another question, did you guys take into account deliveries? I know the Amazon trucks comes on my driveway many times a day, a week, so is that accounted?
It's counted in it's counted in the trip generation,
Okay.
sure. Yeah.
Okay. All right, those are all the questions I have for now.
How do you expect deliveries to work, for this, property? Whether it be FedEx or Amazon?
Yeah, I mean, as we've seen in many, mostly deliveries generally of that type, not always, but generally come in the daytime. So there is generally, a good maneuverability. Clearly, you know, the question that comes up, I'll anticipate it, because every time I do a multifamily development, what about moving trucks? Well, in those situations, they're gonna have to make arrangements to come in. They'll probably have to park at some point in time, either on the site or out in the street. But those are very isolated occurrences that every multifamily deals with.
Just remind me, packages are delivered, or is there a place indoors to keep them, or they stayed outside? What's?
There'll be a package room, where the mail is.
Yeah, that would make sense.
They'll still have the ability to come in, turn around, back up, and come out, and they can park behind a couple cars and run into the front door, so they don't have to be necessarily, if there's no parking.
I mean, do you expect the delivery trucks, though, to go into the parking lot as opposed to park on the street?
Right, if there's availability to park on the street, they're gonna park on the street, that's the easiest thing, you know.
No, yeah. No, yeah. Commissioner Harrison?
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't clear on the actual height of the proposal. It wasn't clear to me. I know it kind of slopes, so I just wanted to get clear on that.
From the street side, it's 47 feet.
Okay.
And then it slopes from front street to back, so the street's higher than the back.
Correct. The rear side, it's 12 feet higher, so, you know.
Good drop.
60 feet.
So the parking garage is subsurface for much of the distance. They have to excavate.
The grade in that site runs from the southwest to the northeast. So when you're coming in, you're going downhill and coming around. You have to excavate the portion that's closest to the street is excavated, absolutely.
So from the street view, was I accurate what I said earlier? From the street view, it looks like it's 4 stories, which is around 47 feet. From the side towards the back, it's 5 stories, because it's 4 stories over parking. Plus, are the utilities in the attic area, or are they outside?
The condensers will be on the roof, the flat portion.
On the roof.
There was a question about that,
Yeah.
the air conditioning condensers there on the roof.
Dumpsters are also a concern.
I'm gonna address that.
Yeah. I've never seen a dumpster that was not abused, just FYI.
Commissioner Braman?
Is there a space, in the front of the development facing Berkeley Road for a pedestrian walkway?
We're gonna build a sidewalk, the entire length of the project.
The entire length of the property is gonna be sidewalk, but it's not gonna connect to any, there's no pre-existing sidewalk on it, on the side. Okay.
Did you, between last hearing and now, we had a report from our, engineer, Mr. Hurley. Okay, so I'll let you do it on your terms. Commissioner Harrison?
Yeah, I had a question for Mr. West.
I'm sorry, there are questions down here, I'm
Just
looking
in
to the left.
relation to the note, or the letter that we got from Mr. Hurley, was he on site? Did he go down there?
Yes, I believe you did, yes.
Okay. I noticed in his correspondence, he said there's a lot happening down there. I took note of that.
Let me get to Commissioner Francis,
Yep.
on this side. I'm sorry, are you done with Commissioner Harrison?
I had a question about, like, fire safety. I know when the, neighbors brought that up. I think, I was looking this up, I think the National Protection of Fire Safety, they recommend like 27 personnel be there at a structure this size? Do you think Fairfield has enough personnel if something did happen?
Well, as I'll comment on, again, in my final closing, you had comments from the fire marshal, and I can tell you categorically that the proposal as designed complies with all requirements of the state fire code and the state building code. But I'll reference in my closing remarks, Fire Marshal Higgins' comments, which.
He said we have enough personnel?
He had no negative comments with regard to the proposal.
Commissioner Francis?
I had written down last hearing that the height was 53 feet in the back.
53 feet in the back?
47 at the street and 53 in the back, was that, and tonight I'm hearing 60.
Yeah, it's 47 feet in the front, 12 feet lower when you get to the back where the parking area is. So that would be approximately 60.
And, then the mechanicals on the roof are higher than that. That's the building.
That's the building. The highest point of the building is actually in where the gable is, and it's lower where the mechanicals are.
Okay.
Way down there.
And,
Oh, go ahead, Commissioner Francis.
and I certainly hear a lot of demand for an updated traffic study because of the time it was done, both during COVID and during Thanksgiving week, but.
If you're going to do that, then you're gonna need to do that, and you should have done that with every project that's come before you in the last 2 years. And I think that would not be a fair result here. The bottom line is, built into this traffic study, based upon DOT guidance, is a 20%
an additional
increase.
20%.
And this is nothing new that the commission hasn't seen. So, I mean, I'm not debating that with you, but we certainly would not, we would object to that because that's not a standard that has been applied. And as I'm gonna get into in my closing remarks, standards here, are important. And I don't think this particular project should be held to a different standard in terms of the traffic report than what the DOT and what this commission has expected in the past.
And traffic is one thing, but it's the parking on the street that is
I'm gonna
serious.
address all of that as soon as we've entertained your questions. I'm gonna try to be thorough in addressing everything I've heard, and answering questions, that the commission and the public have raised.
Commissioner Braman?
You may address this in your rebuttal, but, do you anticipate electric vehicle charging stations?
Yeah, I think we show one on the site plan, actually, outside the building, not.
Outside.
Not in the parking garage? Okay. And, do you anticipate assigned parking spaces for residents?
No.
Okay, or any fee?
No.
Thank you.
Commissioner Braun?
In the code review, the fire department said they wanted to be able to plow the driveway, and they didn't want to use pervious pavement, but the conservation permit says they must be pervious. Could you address that?
I didn't know, I'd have to look the comments of the fire department in terms of.
I saw a conflict between what the fire department said to do at the code review, and versus what, conservation permit requirement is.
Okay.
Yeah, here it is. It says, fire, department access has pavers with a turnaround. It says, fire department access has pavers with a turnaround, but this location will need 100% accessible with plowing. And I assume that means pavers are not gonna be adequate for properly plowing it for fire access. But then conservation requires, and the permit also in the code review, needs to use pervious pavement, obviously, because you're taking up a whole lot of the wetlands buffer area.
The only thing after the code review, the site plan was amended, and that site plan was submitted to the fire marshal. And you, as I'll elaborate on, you have his email response. So whatever, the situation is, I think the fire marshal is satisfied with the access and with the provision being made for whatever. And Pat, you want to?
Yeah, I think the only portion that he was talking about was where these
Mr. Rose?
pavers.
Can you take the mic with you, please? I'm sorry.
the fire, what they were talking about was the small section there, which is grassroots pavers, which the fire truck comes in and backs up onto and turns around. They can be plowed. I mean, it's a concrete paver that grass can go through it, but you can still plow.
Okay. Fire department seems to think otherwise in their code review. Can you point out where the fire and police, confirmation reports or emails are?
I'm gonna go,
can't seem to find.
I'm gonna go through all that, okay, and I'll give you the exact dates of the emails and everything like that.
Any other questions from the commission? Okay, Commissioner Harrison.
Are you the traffic guy too? Okay. Is he here?
He is being
Okay.
delayed in a hearing in Darien.
Okay.
Hopefully he'll get here, but if we can answer any questions.
Yeah, I just had a question about the statement that was in the report about parked vehicles do not impact ISD or SSD.
Right, I'm gonna
Go into that?
go through that as well, and also refer to Mr. Hurley's.
Okay, very good.
Other questions? All right, Attorney Fallon, you're on.
Thank you. And first of all, let me say thank you, to the members of the commission for your usual courtesy and careful attention to this application. I also want to thank the members of the public, for their, courtesy and professionalism. I always say in these situations that Fairfield's a special town because we treat each other, even in situations where we don't agree, with civility and conduct ourselves accordingly. So I thank you for that. I'm not here as an apologist for 8-30G. But I'm not here to apologize for 8-30G either. It is the law of this state, and it's motivated by the fact that we do have a crisis in this state regarding the lack of the need for affordable housing. The Fairfield study, which is going to be totally placed in the record as it should be, the Fairfield 2022-2027 Affordability Housing Plan adopted by the Affordable Housing Committee in May of last year, makes their findings, and again, I'm not going to read them all to you, as I did many more at the hearing, at the beginning of the hearing, but I do think as we come to the close of this hearing, it's important that we do go back and look at some of the comments that were made here by our own Affordable Housing Committee. And that is that the number of people affected by the unaffordability of housing in Fairfield continues to grow. That unaffordability of housing for people and families of modest incomes has continued to grow. That more housing and choices are needed to meet the changing housing needs and desires of older people, younger residents, and current and future residents throughout their lives. According to the Fairfield Counting Housing Need Assessment, almost a third of the households in Fairfield are considered cost burden. These are households that already live here in Fairfield. And according to the United Way Alice metrics, indeed a full 1/4, 28% of our Fairfield residents are likely struggling with overall cost of living. So there is a housing need, and I don't think anybody in this room denies that. And the neighbors have spoken to that. And you've spoken to that, not only in this hearing, but in hearings previous to that. But that is the root of 8-30G. And that's why 8-30G in its remedial aspects can be considered harsh, because we are trying to deal with a crisis in this state. So let's take a deep breath and let's let this matter be decided on two things. One is the law, which you have shown from previous applications that you respect, and the other are the facts, the actual facts, not the speculative facts, but the actual documented facts. I'm going to give you each of this so you'll have it. And again, I will not read it to you. This is just some statements relative to case law that relates to...
You can just, we'll pass it down.
You're passing it down.
Thank you.
The legal standard at 8-30G. And again, in my opening remarks, I touched on this, and I'm not going to read this to you, but as you know, 8-30G requires that if you deny an application
you must and have the burden of showing that the decision is necessary to protect a substantial public interest in the health, safety, and other matters which you may legally consider, and that such public interest clearly outweighs the need for affordable housing, and that such public interest cannot be protected by reasonable changes to the affordable housing development. As I've indicated, and you were aware, that standard is exemplified by the cases that say that there has to be more than a mere theoretical possibility of a specific harm to the public interest if the application is granted. The record must contain evidence of a quantifiable probability that a specific harm will result if the application is granted. I ask you, when you take into your deliberations, to keep in mind that standard, a quantifiable probability that a specific harm will result if the application is granted. Mere concerns alone do not amount to sufficient evidence to support the denial of the application. Now, specifically in some of these cases, I cited page 3 of that material I just handed out to you, the West Hartford Interfaith Coalition case. Possible problems due to proposed density of the site did not outweigh the need for affordable housing. At the bottom of that page, citing the Town Close Associates case, which is a New Canaan case, the appeal was sustained where the record did not sufficiently support the Commission's reason for denial, that the traffic generated by the development and the size of it at the proposed location was sufficient to outweigh the need for affordable housing. Claims of zoning by a zoning commission about inadequate gaps in traffic to allow drivers to safely exit from a proposed development on a road with a high traffic volume, and safety concerns for children at a nearby bus stop were merely speculative and not supported by sufficient evidence in the record, where there was no evidence as to the extent of harm posed by these claimed safety concerns, or the probability of such harm if the application was granted. That's Avalon Bay Communities versus the town of Wilton. Emergency vehicles, access for fire trucks, adequacy of public street for secondary emergency access were not reasons supported by sufficient evidence in the record, which outweighed the need for affordable housing. And the record did not establish that there was more than a theoretical possibility of a specific harm to the public interest. Another Avalon Bay case out of the town of Stratford. The fact that the proposed affordable housing is not consistent with the surrounding residential neighborhood is not a sufficient basis for denying the application. That's the North Haven Opportunity for Affordable Housing case. Inconsistency with the surrounding zone and concerns about higher density do not outweigh the needs for affordable housing. That's the Juniper Ridge Associates case versus the Wallingford Planning and Zoning Commission. So that's the standard that you, sitting statutorily as commissioners, have to apply, rigorous though it may be. So with that as the standard, the legal standard that applies, let's look at the facts. Let me start with a few housekeeping items and then get to the really central issues. The lighting plan that we've submitted, supported by a photometrics analysis, conforms and complies with all the standards in the regulations pertaining to exterior lighting. We did look at the matter of a possibility of a trash chute. Pat looked at that carefully with his team. It's simply not feasible based upon the number of units. The creation of a trash chute would significantly affect one unit on each floor and cause the loss of at least one parking space. Having said that, we have no objection to a condition of approval that would require that the dumpster enclosure be upgraded to a masonry structure on 3 sides so that it would only have access for pickup. It would not be a fence, it would be a masonry structure. So let's turn to the heart of the issues and what the facts, I think, demonstrate. I already mentioned in my remarks the matter of density, and
density in and of itself not providing a proper basis, for denying an 8-30G. I think it's interesting when we talk about density to point out that the alternative here on these properties could be 3 two-family residences. Now, those are 6 units of housing, based upon FAR and coverage requirements that would apply. They could be 3,000 square foot homes. They could house families of 3, 4, 5, 10, or 12, or they could house up to 5 unrelated individuals. So that's what you could have on this site. I mentioned in my remarks 2 weeks ago, Moritz Place. I think that is comparable in terms of a location. It's walkable, just like this is a walkable area. And in terms of density there, that's a 27,969 square foot site that we approved 29 units on. And it has, and had, as approved, 38 parking spaces, or a ratio of 1 per 3 per unit. So I think as a matter of density, the law doesn't support that as a basis for denial, but
The
more
ratio
importantly,
The ratio is 1.3.
1.3, I'm sorry if I said something else. It's 38 spaces for 29 units.
Thank you.
Was that also 4 stories?
No, I do not believe it is. It's 3. So again, density, I think if you look at it as a factual basis and a legal basis, doesn't provide evidence or reason to deny this application based upon the standard that applies. We have our sewer approval. You have the minutes. WPCA approved the sewers on February 15th of this year, 2023. Let me talk about wetlands. And I would say respectfully that this commission owes, and I'm not meaning to be presumptuous, but I think you owe to your colleagues on the Wetlands Agency, who also volunteer their volunteer time, and the Inland Wetlands staff, who I can tell you firsthand is highly competent, as is your staff. But I think you owe them some respect for the decision that they made, because they made the decision after careful analysis, which I'll elaborate on in a minute, and they approved the Inland Wetlands permit for this development. The holes that you heard about were not a matter of any improper or nefarious activity. The holes were required to be dug so that the matter of whether or not there was any underground piping, underground water courses could be laid to rest. And Mr. Bishop was on the site when those excavations were made and observation taken of them, and it was only as a result, after that investigative activity and his report back to the agency, that they granted the Inland Wetlands permit. So I just think it's important that this record be set straight, because there's not another Inland Wetlands agency, in my experience that I practice in front of, that's more thorough and rigorous. I know Ms. Braun was a longtime member of that agency, and I think she could.
Oh, I thought you went before them a lot, though.
That's right. I remember you got me once or twice. But no, the bottom line is they're very rigorous, and they did a very good job here. And they didn't ignore the neighbor concerns or questions with regard to whether there was any underground pipes that could be deemed to be water course or have any influence or impact if this site were developed. And it was only after examining that very carefully that they did in fact grant the permit, which they in fact did. If you want to talk more general matters pertaining to drainage, again, first thing you want to note, you have an email dated April 21st, 2023 from Mega Jane of the engineering department, wherein after reviewing these plans, the same plans that are in front of you tonight, she said that she had no further comments, that all of her code enforcement comments had been addressed, and she had no comments, negative comments with regard to the proposal. The other thing I would say about drainage, and this goes too to some of the comments we heard recently tonight about the Rooster River. Right now on this site, there is absolutely no water detention. There are no provisions on this this site now for water retention, or water detention, or water quality. Although we may be increasing our impervious area, we are retaining all water, all runoff on site in accordance with all the town engineering department requirements. So right now, this site currently has no provision for retention of water, and now it will. And so if there is a general community-wide concern about the Rooster River and things we've heard tonight, great, because this site is going to deal with that in a positive way. It's going to eliminate runoff that would contribute to those kinds of problems. Parking. We have 8 studios, and right now, based upon the nature of those units, the studios and the 29 one-bedrooms, we are prescribing a ratio of 1.3 parking spaces per unit. As I pointed out before, this is typical of approved 8-30G developments, and the courts, as I pointed out in my remarks, have found that a ratio as low as 1.2 units does not create a basis for denial of an 8-30G. We believe strongly that the 51 parking spaces, taking into consideration the target market here and the unit mix, will provide more than appropriate parking on site. The fire department, you have an email from the fire marshal dated May 1, 2023, from Fire Marshal Higgins. I quote, "I do not see any issues from a fire department point of view." So far, check the engineering box, check the inland wetlands box, check the fire department box.
Are you gonna go back for the engineering, as I think I said earlier, Mr. Hurley, the sight line and his no, that's fine, just, let's not check the engineering box completely.
Well, I checked the
drainage.
I checked the drainage engineering
That's fine.
box. Now I will check
No, go through it before you
the
check it.
police. I want to address, the matter of traffic safety. The development will generate 16 and 20 vehicle trips during the weekday morning and weekday afternoon peak hours. That's approximately 1 car every 3 minutes. The access drive will operate at levels of service A. You have, and I'll get into Mr. Hurley's 2 emails momentarily, but you have confirmation from both your own engineering department and from our traffic engineer that appropriate intersection site distance, ISD, and stopping site distance is provided. This goes all the way back to a confirmatory email that is in the traffic report appendix dated March 29, 2022 from Laura Pooley, who before her retirement reviewed all the data that you have in the traffic report. And she found and communicated to Mr. Galante, who was then, before his retirement, doing this traffic report, that everything was in order. There's a fallacy here, maybe, but I think Mr. Hurley clears it up, that somehow parked cars have anything to do, by way of obstruction, with satisfying the site distance and stop site distance requirement. They don't. If you look at Mr. Hurley's emails, there are 2 of them that are exceedingly relevant. One was Mr. Hurley to Mr. Wendt on Friday afternoon at 3:52. That's this, you have it. Engineering has the following comments in relation to the proposed project. Although the previous engineer had approved the methodology and statistical information in the report, engineering has reviewed submitted information to confirm it meets department standards. The site access generates traffic similar to a subdivision, therefore intersection site distance is applicable. I will not read this whole thing, but he goes on to say, the straight layout of the road and generally low slope of the road assist in meeting the required site distance and stopping site distance. I would recommend additional safety measures such as no parking along the frontage of the site, which I'll comment on in a minute, and confirming low slope platform, less than 3% of the first 20 feet of the access to ensure actual field site distance is met. Please have the applicant/consultant submit driveway profile for the first 50 feet from the edge of the street and include sidewalk through the apron. This will also confirm that the exit apron platform approach is less than 3%. We did that, and you have an email now for this record from Mr. Hurley saying, and I don't have it in front of me, it's on my phone because it came late today, but basically saying, done. Okay, so.
Mr. Went, we have that email on the record?
It was forwarded to you late this afternoon about 4 o'clock.
I saw
You
that.
have it, Mr. Wynn? Could I trouble you just to read it? It is very brief, I know.
Yeah, let him, yeah, that's fine.
What it simply says is, Jim, the revised plan and profile detail meets ADA specifications and is within the slope threshold of a driveway approach for access and site distance purposes. Okay, so
Thank you.
there's a number of components of the traffic. First, we've got trip generation, 16 and 20 vehicle trips. That's approximately, worst case scenario, 1 car during the peak for every 3 minutes. We've got the service, the driveway service at level of service A. Site distance, you now have 2 town engineers, the long departed and much missed Ms. Pooley and the very much respected Mr. Hurley saying, yup, it satisfies both ISD and SSD. And you have the traffic engineer, who is the only licensed traffic engineer in the whole place, saying, yep, we satisfy that as well. So site distance, again, check that box. Let's see what else I want to cover here.
Any questions, Commissioner Harrison?
Yeah,
I'm sorry, Commissioner.
I just want to say, Ms. Foley did not go to the site, correct? And she's not a traffic expert.
I can't speak to that. I know I don't know that she didn't go to the site. I do know what she did do was she reviewed all the site, profiles and all the documentation to determine if the site distances was met.
I thought she said in her email on 3/29/22 to Mr. Galante that she didn't go to the site herself and there's no firsthand analysis of her, correct?
Like I said, I don't know if she went to the site.
I'm just going by what's in the
But at
record.
this point in time, with Mr. Hurley's exhaustive work, so I'm very comfortable relying on that.
Is he a traffic expert?
No, but he's your town engineer, and, the only, if you want to rely on the traffic, the licensed traffic engineer, that would be contained in the report. But I think the commission has always, and quite properly, turned to Mr. Hurley and his department to give them guidance on matters with regard to site distance. And, in this case, I think he did that very well and very thoroughly.
Can I just ask?
Commissioner Braun.
Yes.
Just going back to a comment from earlier, on page 4 of the traffic study, it does say peak time is 9 to 10. And I'm trying to find data, it does say peak time is 9 to 10, and that's what the data was collected. Maybe that was an error in the report, but that is what it says on page 4 of your report.
Pat, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I believe he's referencing, that's when they had the most traffic, the time between those hours. That's not necessarily where he's collecting data from, that's where he's finding the most traffic.
In other words, he took the counts from 7 to 9, but he found that they were at their height at that time. So I think really that's what I have, relative to traffic, except one thing that again is, I think, highly critical. And that's probably the last memo and the box check that I want to share with you. And that is, you have in your record an email from the police chief, Chief Calamaris, dated May 8th, 2023, to Mr. Wendt. Jim, I've reviewed the attached documents regarding the 40-unit complex proposed under 8-30G at 277, 291, and 301 Berkeley Road. Unfortunately, and I think what he had were all, well, I won't editorialize. Unfortunately, the conditions depicted in the photographs, those are the photographs that were submitted to you, represent changing environmental conditions, which in my opinion, in high italics, does not pose a risk to public health and safety, which is a requirement for the denial of an 8-30G proposal. Should you have any further questions, feel free to reach out.
And just to be clear, the photographs were those submitted by public?
That's my understanding, based on my conversation with Mr. Went.
Correct, Mr. Went?
So, without laboring the box check, here you have a public hearing record brought under the standards that I started out talking about under 8-30G, where you're checked off on the drainage from the engineering department, you're checked off on the sight lines from the engineering department, you're checked off on fire safety from the fire marshal, and you're checked off on public safety from a police perspective, traffic perspective by the police chief. The last issue that I want to discuss briefly with you is Mr. Hurley's reference to elimination of spaces in the front of our property. We don't see that as being productive. I think it's important to point out that by and large, a lot of the people who are parking on the in front of our property now are people, tenants who are in the building or living in those buildings. And once this new development is finished, you know, they hopefully will be taking, those people residing there will be taking advantage of the 51 on-site spaces. But to the extent that you've heard testimony that on-street parking is desirable here, it, in my mind, would not be prudent to seek to eliminate on-street parking in the front of our building. But more importantly, it's not legally appropriate. There's a case which the commission is well familiar with, and that's 131 Beach Road LLC, which involves obviously the Beach Road property, which you spent many evenings adjudicating. And I'm going to give everybody, you probably all have it in your files, but I'm going to give everybody a copy of that case. In that case, too, there was a condition of approval with regard to the elimination of certain spaces along the frontage of that proposed facility. And I just want to share with you some comments from the court in that case. And the first one is if you go to page 14, and the court goes to say, the issue remains, however, as to whether the commission's decision was necessary to protect substantial interests and safety when it imposed the condition, that being the condition to eliminate on-street parking. They then referenced Mr. Galante, who said, and I quote, he testified that there was no accidents related to the existing Masonic driveways over a 3-year period. The traffic study indicated that the intersection site distance would be desired and required and could be provided. None of the other driveways on Beach Road have the same parking restrictions to provide the same intersection distances. The town engineer recommended that the parking spaces be removed, but also conducted a test with her department's van and concluded that the sight line was not impeded. So here again, you have a situation where the town engineer is saying, yes, you meet the sight lines, but you should eliminate those spaces. I guess out of concerns about, you know, parked vehicle obstructions, which really isn't relevant to the sight line analysis. The commission, and then he goes on, and this is where I think we come down here. The commission has no regulatory basis to impose the condition. Fairfield has no sight line regulations. Instead, the commission appears to have adopted, evidently on a case-by-case basis, a State Department of Transportation regulation to justify the condition to remove the on-street parking spaces, even though the town's engineers wrote that parked vehicles are not considered to be an obstruction in determining adequate sight lines pursuant to state regulations. The discretion of a commission must be controlled by fixed standards applied in all cases in like manner. Although the Connecticut General Statute HS 2 provides that the public health, safety, convenience, and property values may be considered in making determinations on special permits, this has to be done in conjunction with, and not as an alternative to, the standards which the zoning regulations themselves provide. A commission is not at liberty to ignore the existing regulations and to treat them as invalid, nor can the commission hold the applicant to standards which are not found in the regulations or evenly apply to all properties. So, I think, again, this case is definitive here in the same manner, in that if you're finding, as both cases did, that the sightline standard is met, and is, as Mr. Hurley's memo of Friday makes clear, parked cars obstructing sightlines doesn't really apply to the sightline compliance issue, then you can't say eliminate the cars. And in this particular case, in the Old Post Road case, the court found that condition to be invalid. The only other thing I want to leave you with in terms of that case,
Well, let me ask you this, though. In that Beach Row, we had it was a condition of approval.
Correct.
I don't believe Mr. Hurley is suggesting a condition of approval in this instance.
Well, how would you eliminate the spaces otherwise, though?
Well, I think he's making a recommendation that this commission could very well adopt as a recommendation, suggestion really, that this applicant go to the,
If it was done in that regard, in that manner, as a recommendation or suggestion, I have no objection. But where I don't want to be,
no, and I would appreciate,
I don't want it to
appreciate
be a
that.
condition of approval, and then I'm at the mercy of the police.
No,
commission.
that, I understand that, and I won't get too much into detail with the Beach Road application, which is on appeal, and it's Mr. Hurley's, opinion in that respect, and in subsequent applications, I won't get into more detail beyond that. But your record, as you said, is fair, but I think in his email, it's a recommendation.
Okay, and I feel much different about a recommendation than a condition of approval.
Yeah, and I,
Just to finish a couple of things, and again.
hold on, I'm sorry, was there a question?
I thought Kathy did.
Kathy,
Yeah, I had a question.
Yeah.
Okay, going back to page 4, can I just read it to you? Because it says very clearly, based on the results of the field surveys, the peak hour volumes were identified and the basis for the analysis. These time periods were identified as the following: weekday mornings, 9 to 10 a.m., weekday afternoons, 3 to 4.
Right.
Now, I don't know if the data came from other times, but that's what the report is saying. That's one question.
I interpret it the same way Pat does, and I think they were out there taking counts from 7 in the morning
Can you
until
point that out
10.
in the report, because I couldn't find it? I mean, we didn't get the appendix at the same time.
Hold on, Mr. Wentz,
Okay, then I have another,
Mr. Wynn may
hold on,
have to
let's get an answer the first.
Well, it's not a page number, but figure 2 of the report is a graph. Oh, sorry.
I think you can talk on that. Why would the report narrative say that if the data doesn't match?
Okay. Further into the report, there's a figure 2, which is a colored graph, and it highlights the peak hours, and I agree with, the Commissioner Braun's, the report says what it says: morning peak hour 9 to 10, afternoon 3 to 4, and then 3 or 4 more pages into the report, there's the chart of the 24 hours of traffic, and they highlight the morning peak from 9 to 10 and the afternoon from 3 to 4. So based on the graph of the actual count.
Okay, so the narrative.
So I think it's correct to say that the traffic engineer's opinion is as stated in the report.
But I don't believe either of our town engineers actually went to the site, at least none of their emails say that. So, I don't know how, and I do recall on several prior other HS30Gs, it was clear that everything is very site-specific, okay? So we've heard over the last two hearings, there's tons of parking on the road now. And overflow parking for this will only add to that problem. That was one of the bases by which, Mr. Hurley, when we did 15 Umpqua Road, said, yeah, parked cars can be considered, especially if they're there all the time. So if they're there all the time already, and we don't have an expert, I would honestly like to see, the town get its own traffic study and look at all these variables, because it's not just that, there's other variables. There's the speed. The speed, I think, was measured during a holiday week, or was it the volume? Maybe both.
Both, I think. And, but
Okay.
it was
And
over a 9-day
yeah.
period. I mean, it wasn't like over the Thanksgiving.
But they did it with radar, don't you have to stand there? I mean,
Yeah, I guess.
so were they there all day long? I don't see the data for that. I don't understand the data for that. I mean, if you're using radar, you have someone standing there, and what time of day, day of week were they doing that? I don't know if that's adequate. And so, so you have speed, which is a factor in sightline calculation. And then you have, volume, okay, which is gonna be generated, which is also a factor for safety. Then you have cars parked, which is also a factor, in my opinion, in sightline, because we're the ones who are gonna be accountable if we create an unsafe situation.
I think,
You know.
I respect your opinion.
Yeah.
But here's where I would come down
Yeah.
with it as a legal matter.
Mhm.
First of all, I think what's relevant is whether you're meeting the ISD and the SSD requirements. And it's not necessary for the engineer to go out into the site to confirm that or not, because they rely on the profile drawings, the speed studies, and so that is what is critical there. So that's number one. Number two, the only, really expert testimony here relative to the safety issue as it relates to the sight lines is you've got a professional traffic engineer, Hardesty and Hanover, saying, yep, this meets the ISD and the SSD, and you have your own town engineering department saying it does too. So I think it's a tough burden to then turn around and say, we're not, I'm not trying to be, funny, but to say, well, yeah, the licensed traffic engineer says it meets the ISD and the SSD, and our engineering department confirms that. And by the way, we got a letter from the police chief, an email saying, there's nothing here, but we're gonna throw this applicant into another traffic study. You gotta do what you gotta do, but I don't think that passes muster based upon, respectfully, the legal standards that apply to HS30G. One other thing I just wanna say, because it leads to the last thing, the other thing that's, I think, interesting in terms of this conversation we're having is further comments in the Old Post Road case, which I will share with you. And no, this is the Old Post Road case where I was talking about a minute ago, where the judge said.
Is that the Masonic Temple one?
Yes.
I call that
Beach Road.
I'm sorry, Beach Road. Okay, anyway, as part of the commission's finding, it cited.
Beach Road, I'm sorry.
Yes, it cited congestion based upon lay testimony as support for the removal of the on-street parking spaces. And that the condition, God bless you, was necessary to protect the substantial public interest in safety. Traditionally, traffic congestion and street safety have been areas where the commission may rely on their own personal knowledge. Significantly, the consideration that applies to zoning applications is not the overall volume of traffic, but whether the increases in traffic will cause congestion. The appellate court has recognized, however, that, quote, public testimony is not to be considered substantial evidence when it is not supported by anything other than speculation and conjecture on the part of those objecting to the party's proposed activities. The generalized concerns of two laypersons, he's talking about in the context of this particular case, who opposed the plaintiff's proposed activities were not substantial because their concerns were not supported by anything other than speculation and conjecture, as neither layperson indicated any type of expertise that would buttress their lay opinion. And then citing another Connecticut Supreme Court case, the court held, while the commission could take into consideration
the neighbor's concerns and observations as to current road conditions. The neighbor's remarks as to the adequacy of the streets to accommodate traffic and prospective standards for congestion addressed matters of professional expertise, and the neighbors did not purport to have the training or skills needed to properly assess traffic impact, nor did they offer any expert opinion on their behalf. Accordingly, their comments amounted to generalized concerns about hypothetical effects of increased traffic. So again, with no disrespect intended to the neighbors, but since we are dealing in a legal proceeding here, that's where we are finding ourselves. And I don't think the fact that Berkeley, it can be congested, that it's 30 feet wide, that there is parking, that there are times, as we have seen, when, you know, a FedEx truck can stop traffic or people have to go around it. I understand all that. I do. But it doesn't rise to the level under an 8-30G application of a documented probability of a specific harm occurring, especially in the context of, you know, the accident history here. I know we saw a vehicle, or whatever it was, 2007 or whatever that was, but again, the record evidence, the facts indicate that there's been two kind of fender benders here over the last 2 or 3 years.
Mr., hold on one second, Mr. Went? Did you?
Mr. Chairman, I just, wanted to address 3 questions that were just raised a couple of minutes ago with respect to the traffic. There was a question of whether or not Mr. Hurley went to the site. I can tell you, it's not clear from the email, but I can tell you with my lengthy discussions that I've had with Mr. Hurley, he did in fact visit the site prior to his Friday email. It's also clear, as referenced by Commissioner Harrison in the email in the appendix, that at least at the time that that email was written by Laura Pooley, she had not yet visited the site. But I know for a fact, in speaking with Mr. Hurley, that he did visit the site. And I just wanted to, the last question that Commissioner Braun raised, and I know you probably don't have the hard copy in front of you, it's in the text, we have a hard copy if you want it, but there is the speed study. There's about 30 pages worth of radar study data in the back of the report that talks about the days that it was done, and it's not someone standing out there, they mount a device that records that, and there's like 3 or 4 days of 24-hour data in about 15 pages in the back if you want to take a look at that.
Just one other thing that I was gonna just, I'll finish with the last thing I'll read from the Old Post Road cases.
Beach Road.
Sorry.
It's okay.
While the commission could take into consideration the neighbors' concerns and observations as to Beach Road, the neighbors' remarks as to the adequacy of on-street parking, or the capacity of the street to accommodate traffic and prospective hazards or congestions, I misread it, to accommodate traffic and prospective hazards or congestion, address matters of professional expertise, particularly as to how these things might impact the sightline. The neighbors did not purport to have the training or skills needed to assess sightline safety, and there are no other experts' opinions. Accordingly, their comments amounted to generalized concerns about hypothetical effects of increased traffic. So, I appreciate everybody's, again, courtesy and your patience with me. I think we can finish it up. But without being redundant, difficult cases, I understand that. But that statute exists for a reason. In the legislature's wisdom, they think this statute helps address a crisis in the state with regard to affordable housing. And the burden to deny an 8-30G application is exceedingly high. And when you take the understandable emotion that you hear when these types of applications often come before you, you have to, and you've shown the ability to do it in the past, strip away the emotion and deal with the facts. The facts that you have in your record based upon what's been submitted. And in this case, the most important facts for me, as it relates to the standard of 8-30G, are the facts that come from your own municipal staff, engineering, fire, police, inland wetlands, all of whom have spoken unequivocally with regard to this particular development
and certainly in no way supporting any finding based upon the very difficult standard that exists, that what is being proposed here would adversely, impact public health and safety. So, again, I appreciate the neighbors' civility and courtesy, I appreciate the commission's attention, and I hope, you'll digest all of this, as you always do in your efficient fashion, and make a decision to grant this application.
Commissioner Collins?
Yeah, you mentioned about the accident, study and stuff. You said it happened a number of years ago?
Well, the gentleman who spoke via whatever, he showed a picture of a car, and I think he said it was about 10 years ago.
All right. There was another one that was submitted, I think, through here.
I haven't seen that, so I can't.
That was from a police officer who's relatively a rookie, so it can't be that.
I haven't spoken to that. It's possible that that accident report did not make it into the database when the material was grabbed.
Commissioner Francis?
Let's discuss the trash for a while. People are going to empty their own trash into this dumpster.
Correct.
How does it open? From the top? From the
No,
front?
it'll be open. I mean, what I suggested is to
Yeah,
improve it.
three-side
Would
cinder
be
block.
three-side masonry and, just like, so it would be.
Yeah.
Hang on, you put your trash in, just like I do in my office.
This is not going to be like the ones behind CVS and
No, and it'll have to be accessible, it'll have to be a dumpster
because
that is.
they're always broken, they're open, if they're plastic, they're ripped, if they're steel, they're bent, they're left open. I mean, people can't put up with this.
Well, that'll be the
Where are
job
they
of
gonna
the
open?
management, that'll be the job of the management company to ensure that the dumpster is in good working
Is
order.
it going to be recycled also?
They'll have to be, yeah, I mean, that's required.
How does it open?
I'm not
kind of doors? Well,
I'm not
who designed it?
waste
What's it gonna
management
do?
expert, but they do have dumpsters that are properly accessible and also provide for a recycling bin and a trash bin. I see them all over town. I mean, in residential settings.
Like your office, behind your office, if I went there and looked, I would see what you're talking about.
Yeah, although I think there's better ones, to be honest with you. I mean,
Who's your carting company?
I don't know. I'd be afraid
A lot
to
of bad
mention,
ones.
I'd be afraid to mention it publicly. I don't know.
Commissioner Harrison, did you have a question?
Yeah, we're talking
I was
about
gonna go down the
sidelines,
lines.
and, we have to sleep at night, it's very important. And I just, can you just go through, did you guys try to, I just wanna make sure I word this right, I wrote it down earlier. I guess was an effort made to secure permission to cross the private driveway where the town right of way is?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Oh, yeah, was there an effort made to, I guess, to cross the driveway, the private driveway where the town right of way is? Is there a private driveway there? No?
No, I don't think so. That's
Okay,
my own.
okay.
We did choose the driveway location, as Mr. Rose could elaborate on, to maximize the sight line. So we did take care to, locate the driveway.
Commissioner Braun?
I think what Commissioner Harrison might be referring to is in the report, because I looked at it too. It was very confusing, and, the town engineer tried to clarify it, but honestly, I couldn't understand what he was saying either. That to do the sight line the proper way, they were supposed to take measurements crossing private driveways, and this traffic engineer for the applicant didn't do so. And, I don't understand why they didn't, I guess you were saying.
Was there an effort to
Do they
do
try,
that?
can we get it done? So we do it the right way, the way it's supposed to be done, so we can get proper measurements. So,
I think I would just, I mean, I don't see anything in the
Mr.
traffic
Wentz?
report.
yeah, they say it right there.
Well,
There it is.
Mr. Went, can you,
Somewhere down here.
Mr. Went,
In,
Jim, just like switch sides, 'cause you're blocking the camera, I'm not sure it's gonna matter much, but,
sorry,
no, it's,
it was showing my better side, so.
Yeah.
Jim has been both a shirt model and a hand model this evening.
The report talks about the sight line crossing
private driveways, but within the town right-of-way,
Correct.
not inboard of the private property line. They were making that distinction because you may recall, I know you were recused on that, but the commission would recall that on the Beacon View application, there was an issue where the sight line crossed a private driveway
Correct.
on private property. This sight line triangle does not cross private driveways inboard of the town right-of-way. What Mr. Hurley's email, when he went out and analyzed that, thought that they were being conservative, taking it 15 feet from the edge of the pavement rather than 15 feet from the edge of the traveled way, therefore you could actually take that measurement a couple feet closer to the street. And when you do that, it's even less, it crosses less of the private driveways to the point where it would be unlikely that someone would actually park their vehicle there, because it would be too close to it being, sticking out into the street.
I mean, I respect.
So that's my interpretation of what your question was. If it doesn't address that,
I think Commissioner
It's
Harris.
confusing in there,
It is confusing, but I think in terms of the sleeping at night situation, I think if you read the traffic report and then you read Bill's email of Friday and, you know, maybe even talk with him, which you have the right to do because town engineer and even if we get closing the hearing. But I think it should give you peace of mind, because in fact, what it documents is that we did take care to make sure we were measuring the sight line in accordance with the standards that are applied, you know, by the DOT and the local engineering department, and we met those standards.
I know, but the ISD and the SSC, they meet the minimum, and that, I don't have great comfort with that.
Again, the problem you have is,
That's me,
if
you know?
it's the standard,
Right.
and it's the standard for safety, and your engineering says it meets the standard, and your police chief is saying, I don't see any issues here, it's very difficult to then say, well, I'm gonna deny this application based on an inadequate site plan.
Commissioner Braun?
I believe, for me, to approve a project like this, and I've heard from 30 or 40 people about overflow parking right now, children walking to school, and people walking to, the store. I would like to have a much more detailed traffic study on behalf of the town. I have enough questions that have been presented, that we have in the past, and there's no legal reason why we cannot consider parked cars, especially if they routinely park there. And we do have an engineer that one of the neighbors provided who drew right on there as a professional, not as a layperson.
The engineer
That-
actually.
Well, let her finish, please.
Well, no, the neighbor presented something that an
And
engineer.
the neighbor was candid enough to say that in the first instance, the guy reviewed everything and said it complied.
I thought he said it didn't comply.
No, I can qualify Joe Gagliardi. His first study did not incorporate any vehicles on the street.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Which coordinated with what the study did, which showed no issue with line of sight. As soon as you put, and I asked him to do another drawing, put some cars on the street, let's see what happens, and that's where you have all the line of sight.
So that's what I'm talking about.
And that gets to the issue of whether parked cars
I'm-
have any impact on the line of sight technically.
I'm looking at a drawing by an engineer which shows inadequate sight line. Okay, if any cars are parked anywhere in the vicinity.
Well, I don't agree with that characterization, I don't want to be argumentative, but I don't think what was submitted shows an inadequate sight line. I think the sight lines as determined by your engineering department and the only disclosed traffic engineer have met the ISD and the SSD standards. But listen, I don't want to argue with you, I mean, the commission has to do whatever they're going to do, but my own judgment would be that your record is complete and complete, with information that would support the application's approval. But I can't say much more.
Commissioner Levy?
Yeah, now, reading, Judge Berger's opinion, it would appear that he says that the lay testimony and concerns, that does not rise to the point where it can be established as a basis, for proving, more than a theoretical possibility.
Correct.
But a probability, quantifiable probability of harm.
Correct.
But the problem we have here is we've heard from many lay people who are experts in their neighborhood. And I guess the question is the cumulative effect of that something we can consider in the nature of testimony by these neighborhood experts as to a quantifiable probability of harm?
I do not, you'll take careful attention to read the case again, which I know you probably read already. I see nothing in Judge Berger's decision that establishes a quantifiable differential relative to the expertise issue. I think what Judge Berger said in that case is, look at, they are not expert to deal with matters pertaining to sight lines, and that matters that they testify to with regard to congestion or on-street parking doesn't rise to the level to support a conclusion, for example, of an inadequate sight line. I don't think there's anything in his decision, as I read it, that would say, now, if there's 40 of them, that may change the standard. I don't think it makes any difference whether there's 2 neighbors or 40 neighbors or anywhere in between. I think it's a question of the law.
Commissioner Harrison?
I would just say, maybe this is something where it rises to the level where we get an opinion from the town attorney with no disrespect to Mr. Fallon. I just think someone who is a lawyer for the commission should maybe do that. I mean, we take,
That can be
great debt
requested.
and
No,
the
that could-
testimony of a lot of people. We did that in the doggy daycare. We did that in a number of cases. They are fact witnesses. They are experts in their neighborhoods. So that's just my humble opinion.
Well, in any event, I do
Final-
thank you for your.
Final questions? No?
I
Commissioner
have a
Gra-
logistical question for our commission,
Okay, can we,
I mean, a procedural question.
anything for him, or can I, for Attorney Fallon, or,
No, but
okay,
if you
Go ahead,
grant
what's
my procedural question, then we can't close the hearing, probably.
what's your question? Sure, sorry.
Can we commission our own traffic study
I don't think we have
before
a,
we close the hearing?
I'm not sure if
Answer all these questions that were raised.
I'm not even sure we have a budget or procedure for it.
And to put the engineer,
We don't have a budget?
diagram before it that
I've never
shows
done one, my time.
cars are parked, violate sightline. I think we determine if cars parked rise to the level of an obstruction, that could be dealt with in a sightline analysis. And I don't know if the police or anybody else really considered that. I don't have anything detail on that.
Well, I can address that this way. I certainly, having now received the drawing, that was submitted tonight by Mr. Gagliardi, we can certainly have Bill Hurley look at that to see if it, changes his opinion in any way. He's already on record recommending, not requiring, but recommending that the parking be prohibited along the street frontage. I don't know, but we could certainly, share that with him and follow up to see if that changes his opinion in any regard. With respect to engaging, another study, I don't know, we'd have to, if it's with respect to sightline, I think we're able to follow up with Mr. Hurley in that regard. I would say at this point, it was gonna be difficult for us to do a full-blown traffic study, with counts and the like. We'd have to go out, we don't have time within the statutory timeframe.
Sir, please, stop.
We don't have time within the statutory timeframe to go out and engage, an expert and get bids and the like.
And that's where we give it a maximum extension. I don't want the commission to think I'm holding their feet to the fire. I've already sent an email to Mr. Nguyen giving the maximum extension, but that still is only, 65 days?
What's the time frame right now?
Timeframe would run to, by my count, I'd have to check back in the office, but, about mid-July for decision.
To decide?
For decision, yes.
That's a ways away, but, well, so.
We can certainly follow up with the additional information you've received tonight with respect to,
I think part of my problem is, I don't know what assumptions people had when they made their comments. We have a couple of very brief emails from the police, even from the fire. I don't know if the fire department looked and said, oh, they're now using pervious, when I said don't use pervious. And I don't know if the police, captain said, saw anything about parked cars. And hearing the people testify here, these are experts in their town, they're not experts on, as engineers, but cars are parked there a lot. Maybe they weren't there that day, then when he went there. They were there more when I was there, but they weren't there in some of these pictures. But, if you don't know what the facts are, then you could come up with an opinion that's not based on the real potential hazard to the safety of the people that live in the neighborhood now, and that could live in there when you add, 40 to 50, 60 more people and cars. That, I believe, we're setting up a situation for 49 extra cars to be parked on the road. Because that's the difference between what our parking regs formally call for and what is being provided in this application.
The only thing I'll say is that if you look at the email exchange that I had with the police chief, I forwarded him the photos that we received from some of the neighbors nobody's disputing the presence of on-street parking. Basically, I attached a recent email showing photos of existing on-street parking conditions and to which generated his reply. So with respect to the police chief, I think he was, definitely aware of the consistent presence of on-street parking, and it was noted, in the email. I can get clarity with respect to the fire marshal as to whether they were talking about the maintenance of that turnaround, whether that be plowable, as Mr. Rose said, but that we can certainly get clarity on.
And if we do seek an additional report, does that mean we don't close the hearing? Because it sounds like it's new information more than simply, can I have a copy of something that exists? That's.
New report, you mean from Mr. Hurley?
If we seek additional reports from.
The one that was submitted tonight that he reviewed.
No, I mean, that's not something we need to leave the hearing open for. Mr. Hurley, we have the evidence in the record. Mr. Hurley can review that and provide his.
I'm a little reluctant, respectfully, I mean, if Mr. Hurley is going to opine further to the commission relative to, for example, what Mr. Gagliardi submitted today, I would be more comfortable having the hearing left open, so that if we want to respond to that, it may not be necessary, but.
No, that's fine, we can leave.
I wouldn't want to have to sit move if there was something else.
No, so we leave it open. The next one is June 13th. I would expect we'd have to close at that point, and then we'd have late June and early July. Well, let me ask you this, do we have a July meeting that would be within the statutory limit?
I'd have to review that, but again, Mr. Hurley's already on record recommending that
I understand.
parking be removed from the site frontage, and that's where those cars are in the diagram that was submitted by the neighbor's engineer. So if those cars are removed, it's a recommendation.
No, it's a recommendation, no, I understand.
And I have no objection, as I said, to that as a recommendation, and we would pursue that in good faith.
Yes, mindful of, as you said, though, it's a recommendation, it's not a condition of approval. It would be up to the police commission, right, Commission?
Yes.
Police commission, and it would be in their discretion, and if they chose for whatever reason not to follow our recommendation, that your project would not be held up because of that.
Correct. And I have no problem with that.
Commissioner Harrison?
Are we also getting a legal opinion about Mr. Levy's questions?
We can ask, that's something we can ask,
Okay.
for
Yeah,
our,
I can inquire, but again, I don't think that's anything you need to leave the hearing open.
no, yeah,
No,
that's,
I don't, I think you're entitled, but it's just, I would feel better if Bill's gonna provide further information that the hearing be open, because I want to talk to your town attorney, that's your right.
And that means that the public would have until June 13th to submit written testimony as well, right?
I don't think I could say, I mean, you could leave personally, I would feel better, since we're not in two nights public hearing, if the hearing were left open for a limited purpose of any feedback from Mr.
no, and I think that would be appropriate
Because what I
because,
don't want to be, Commissioner Brandon, is after 2 nights of hearing, I don't wanna be in a situation, because I don't think it's in the commission's interest either, when we come here on the 13th and on the 12th, I'm not necessarily saying anything about these folks, but I get a dump of material in the record on all sorts of topics, and now I have to come to you and I'm scrambling and we're running up against a deadline, so
No, and
That's why we wanted to close the hearing,
Well, maybe-
subject to hearing from Mr. Hurley.
I don't
Well,
think you can keep a hearing open without getting public feedback, correct?
Well,
You can't
that's-
partially have one
Mr.
open.
Brandon,
it depends on what,
properly on
Definitely
the
not.
spot, because
Public
you're right. I mean,
comment.
I have enough confidence in Mr. Hurley's analysis that if I had to face a choice, which is not my choice, but if you're asking me, whether I'd like the hearing to remain open, so maybe if I have to say something about Bill's latest comment, I can, and then run the risk that I get all sorts of stuff, then I probably I'd prefer you close the hearing.
I mean, we've always had the option to go to our staff for confirmation and review of certain items. I would suspect maybe the way to handle this is close the hearing. I've requested the credentials, which I don't think should be an issue, right? Yeah. I would let's close and have Mr. Hurley review the information, and should he provide information that you deem requires reopening for whatever reason, I think then we can address it at that point.
I think that's preferable, just because I think.
No, I don't think keeping the hearing open without limitations is, in all fairness, to be fair. I mean, that's not proper, I don't think. We've gone this far. If we have limited items, so be it. But I think what I just suggested is the proper way of handling it. We've gone through 2 hearings.
I agree.
The public had a chance to listen to the application, the last hearing, digest it and come forward. They've presented good materials for us, had the evidence, provided documentation and evidence for us to consider. We have what seems to be 2 items that need to be somewhat addressed, one being the credentials and the other being Mr. Hurley with reviewing the new, diagram, I'll call it. And I think that's all it is at this point.
I stand corrected, I think, on all that basis.
I mean, listen, if he comes back and says something completely new, then I think you have every right to come request an opening, and then we start kind of where it would be, the hearing would be open, limited to that. You present, I would have to let the public present on that limited item, and then you get the rebuttal.
Right, and I think pretty much, because I'm very confident
Lenny?
that Mr. Hurley's not gonna do
Yeah.
anything that's
Mr. Wentz?
unanticipated.
I agree, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
Having said all that, I will close the hearing, subject to the limitations that I've outlined. Attorney Fallon, thank you.
so much, very much, I appreciate it.
Public, thank you for coming out and dealing for a long evening. Thank you. And I will close this application and then, adjourn the hearing. To my commissioners, if you can stay for a little bit.
Thank you,
For what?
Just an update, a litigation update.